Well, we have some disputed national champions this year. Well, I don't know about that, but please check out my new book, Disputed National Champions. The link is in the chat. The link is also in the description section of every video, every live stream here at the Voice of College Football, right at the top of the description section. Grab the link, check it out. You'll love the read. Disputed National Champions. It's a historical reset of the 1990s. And there's so much more to it, basically taking the results of each season during the 1990s and catapulting them forward into the BCS era, the 4-team college football playoff era, the 12-team era, and there might be a 14-team college football playoff era. All right, appreciate you being here, the Voice of College Football. What a day. It's been a heck of a day. And tonight, we've got some big results coming in with Texas moving on to the SEC championship game with a win over Texas A&M. I did not see much of that game. When I say much, I mean like very little. Basically, my day got backed up because of the noon games, and we went live after Ohio State, Michigan, and I was on for 2.5 hours, and then that backed up my 3:30 viewing into like 9 o'clock by the time I got done watching those 3:30 games. USC, Notre Dame, Alabama-Auburn, and I watched Miami, Syracuse. But I checked in on Texas A&M just in time when Texas A&M was down 17-0 in that game. They scored a touchdown. They drove the ball down to the Texas half-yard line. So they're down by 10 points. There are about 4 to 5 minutes left on the clock. They get stuffed over and over, trying to move the interior of the Texas defensive front. Bam, bam, bam. They can't get into the end zone. They have one of the most dynamic, elusive quarterbacks in the nation, Marcel Reed. Okay, they call a timeout. So the big decision strategically is you're down 17-7. You can kick a field goal, make it 17-10. You're still in the game. You're down 1 score. You got to get a stop on defense. And then you're going to have to drive the length of the field, most likely, to score the touchdown to tie the game to get you into overtime. Okay. If you run all those analytics, the better move is to go for the touchdown. So I understand the risk-averse people would say you kick the field goal to stay in the game. I totally get it. And that's what would have been done in the game of football for the last 100 years. But Mike Elko decided, as I would have, that we've got this far to go to make it 17-14, and then we can score a game-winning touchdown, or we can barely move the ball and kick the game-tying field goal to get to overtime. We need this much space. Okay. They call a timeout. They're going to definitely, after running into a brick wall 3 consecutive plays, they're going to come up with a great play. Their best play, the season's on the line. Go to the SEC championship game. Beat your bitter rival that you have not played in 13 years. This is your shot. What are you doing? They ran the same play they ran the other 3 times. After calling a timeout and consulting, Mike Elko is an amazing coach. He might be the best coach in college football. He just might be. He was not the best coach of college football during that sequence. I could not believe that I was watching a quarterback take a handoff and go back and just do one of those where it just seems like they're holding the ball out for the running back for like an eternity. That was a stupid decision. Just an incredibly stupid decision. And Texas won 17-7. So they're on to the SEC championship game to play Georgia, who, of course, skated by Georgia Tech last night, although that did not factor into the SEC. So that's the SEC situation. In terms of the college football playoff, of course, we had Bama come into the weekend at number 13. They won a lackluster game, although Jalen Milroe had a big night, almost 300 yards passing, I think 256 and 104 rushing. He scored 3 touchdowns. Bama won 28-14. A lot of mistakes, a lot of turnovers in the first half, and Auburn could have stayed in the game. They were in the game, but they got stopped so many times in the red zone. And so Hugh Freeze leads Auburn to a 4th consecutive losing season. 2 from him, 2 from Brian Harsin. So 4 consecutive losing seasons at Auburn. They don't go to a bowl game. They're 5-7. And Bama awaits its fate. Okay. Elsewhere in the SEC, of course, on Friday, Ole Miss had a lackluster win against Mississippi State 26-14. That certainly did not help their resume or their cause. However, in what I think is one of the more intriguing situations, big game here. This is an interesting situation involving Clemson and South Carolina. So, this had to be the most important South Carolina-Clemson game in forever. Other than Clemson, of course, under the Dabo Swinney era, having to win that game to continue to advance into the college football playoff when there were only 4 teams and they made it, 5 years in a row? So, of course, they had to win that game, but they were usually like 8 miles better than South Carolina, so that was never an issue. But this was the most competitive and meaningful South Carolina-Clemson game I can remember ever. And I was keeping an eye on it while I was watching this other game and Clemson, South Carolina. And I was mighty intrigued by this game because I thought South Carolina would win the game. They did eventually win the game. I don't know that they were the better team, but they won the game. And Lenora Sellers seems to be a more consistent version of Jalen Milroe. He does all the things Jalen Milroe does. He's not quite as big. He doesn't have that Cam Newton build, but he's more elusive. He's more of a dart, more of a zigzag runner than Jalen Milroe is just fast, big, fast. Good passer. And South Carolina is impressive. Rocket Sanders at running back. Defensive front that might be the best in the country. Really good defense, and they looked impressive and made a lot of mistakes, but beat Clemson. And Clemson, I got to say, they're a better football team than I have been giving them credit for because they just had not played anyone. And when they did, they lost. So Clemson, this was probably Clemson's, no, correct me here. This was Clemson's best game of the season, but they lost. So you can sometimes play your best game and lose because you don't play anybody else that's any good. So this was Clemson's best game, but they lost. Lenora Sellers scored the game-winning touchdown with about a minute left. And then Cade Klubnik brought Clemson right back down the field. He had 16 seconds left from the 18-yard line. So he probably had 3 plays, but he threw a pick. And that was it. Now, what's fascinating to me about this Clemson-South Carolina situation is on the ACC side, Clemson actually, it would have been better for Clemson, of course, to win this game and have Miami go ahead and win at Syracuse and just bow out of the ACC championship game. Let Miami go and get to the college football playoff at 10-2. However, Clemson, at least now, controls its own destiny. Actually, anytime somebody says something about a team or a person controlling their own destiny, that's actually an oxymoron. You don't control your destiny, or it's not a destiny. So that's a stupid comment, but I fall into that too. So anyway, they control their own destiny. And so Clemson takes on SMU for the ACC championship. And of course, if they lose, they've got 4 losses. They're not in the running. So at least it's cut and dry, black and white for Clemson. For South Carolina, I find this very intriguing. Going into this weekend, you had Bama 13, Ole Miss 14, South Carolina 15. And all 3 teams were 8-3. Let me double check to see if anyone's got any questions for me. No questions or comments for me in the chat. Okay. If you got a question or comment, light it up for me and I will respond. So what intrigues me is that South Carolina is playing the best football. I think most people would agree. They are playing the best football. However, you have to recognize and you have to honor the head-to-head results. And so South Carolina is sitting at 15, Ole Miss at 14, and Bama at 13. Bama played a bad Auburn team that's only really won one decent game this year, and they beat them by 2 touchdowns. Kind of a lackluster, not impressive win. It was okay. And then you've got Ole Miss, who actually had an unimpressive win against a bad Mississippi State team, and that game was close. So then you got South Carolina winning the biggest game out of the 3 over the weekend by far, but they're stuck. In my opinion, they have to be stuck behind the other 2. They just have to be. I am not elevating South Carolina. They lost, especially by Ole Miss. They lost by 24 points. I'm not taking South Carolina past Ole Miss. All 3 teams are 9-3. Now, Bama versus Ole Miss. Now, if we're playing the committee, there's no question they're going to keep Bama in front of Ole Miss because going into the weekend, they had Bama in front of Ole Miss, and Bama beat a better team. So, unless there was something else on the resume that would have changed drastically, and I don't believe so because they roughly played the same teams. They had games against LSU, for example, and South Carolina that were are going to change their resumes exactly the same. So that's the SEC scenario. That's the ACC scenario. Credit SMU. They were locked into the ACC championship game, but they won. They took care of business against Cal 38-6. And what's impressive about that is that even though Cal's starting quarterback, Mendoza, was out of the game, Cal has been close against everybody this year, but they got blown out by SMU. So SMU goes into the ACC and they run the table and they go 8-0. They could be 9-0 in their first season in the ACC. I think that's quite remarkable. Rhett Lashley should get consideration for Coach of the Year. Miami, they are one of the big losers of the day. They are probably the biggest loser of the day. Yeah, all things taken into consideration. Logistically, Ohio State is in kind of an emotional way, in a elite sort of way, based on what they're supposed to do, but they should be in the playoff. But for Miami, they blew it. They blew it today. 6th ranked team in the country. Obvious path to the ACC championship game, and Kyle McCord just carved them up. And they lost. They blew a 21-0 lead on top of that. So Miami's out. It's SMU and Clemson. It's Georgia, Texas. What we're going to do this week is what we did with the Ohio State-Michigan game and the Nebraska-Iowa game, and do a common opponents video with all these matchups. This is my favorite time to do, not just watch the football games, but do the content as well. We'll do another rankings predictor. People seem to like that. We'll do our rankings predictor, top 25 that actually makes sense. We dusted this off. It's getting a little cool around here. So there's top 25 that actually makes sense. That'll be out on Sunday. Maybe I'll do a bottom 10 power rankings. We'll match up the conference championship games. And then, of course, in the Big Ten, with the Buckeyes going down, that left the door wide open for Penn State. They blew out Maryland 44-7. So lo and behold, Penn State is in the Big Ten championship game. And lo and behold, if Penn State wins the Big Ten championship game, they would be the number 1 team in the country, I guess, unless it's Texas, maybe. All right. And then finally in the Big 12, we still have a game that matters tonight. All right. So here's the deal. Houston is playing BYU right now. Cougars lead, the BYU Cougars lead 21-10. If BYU wins that game, Arizona State plays Iowa State in the conference championship game. If Houston comes back and wins at BYU, then that would send Colorado to the Big 12 championship game based on just different configurations with the tiebreakers. But most likely we're looking at Arizona State, Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. And I think most of us would agree that with all the topsy-turvy nature of the Big 12 this season, that those are and have been the 2 most consistent and best teams in the Big 12 this year. But Colorado, of course, is rooting for a Houston comeback, and they would get to the Big 12 championship game. And that's for all the marbles. The loser will not make the college football playoff at 10-3. And this is Iowa State's first 10-win season in school history. And also, Iowa State is looking to win its first conference championship since, can anyone in the chat tell me that? What year did Iowa State last win a conference championship? Our friends at Iowa State sometimes get mad at me when I bring this up, but it's one of the worst programs in the history of college football. Iowa State, Oregon State, Vandy, Northwestern, Wake. All right. So I think we've covered everything, and we'll take calls. I do not see any other comments there in the chat. Let's read off the scores. In addition to BYU leading 21-10 over Houston, Air Force 17, San Diego State 14 at halftime. You're all awaiting the Hawaii, New Mexico score. It's Rainbow 7-6, or whatever they call themselves at this point. That is in the second quarter. And we've got a recent final here coming in 2 overtimes. Marshall defeated James Madison 35-33. Marshall is 9-3. And JMU finished the regular season 8-4. I know you were all wanting to talk about those games in particular. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Well, Mark, that Marshall game mattered a lot. They're going to their conference championship game. Okay. Good for Marshall.
Very good for them. Who are they playing?
I have no idea because I don't care about them because they're an irrelevant conference, Mark. But
true. Well,
Mark,
not irrelevant for those folks.
Yeah, irrelevant for 99% of people who watch college football.
True.
Mark, I got to ask you about the elephant in the room. Metaphor. Your boy Ryan Day.
Yeah, my boy. My boy.
Well, he is the head coach of your team.
Yes, he's the head coach. So
he's the leader of the ship.
John Cooper was never my boy. Ryan Day
is Ryan Day now John Cooper?
Pardon me?
Is he now John Cooper to you?
He's got a much better record than John Cooper.
Yeah, but Mark,
much better.
He is mentally soft. He has a mental blockage he cannot get over. I believe if you just replace those Michigan jerseys with Northwestern jerseys, I believe Ohio State wins that game pretty comfortably.
You might be right.
Yeah, but Ohio State missed 2 easy field goals. They made plenty of bad tackling, plenty of bad throws, terrible play calling. They looked tight. They looked flustered. They looked like every pass was going to be the game-winning pass to win the national championship. And to me, that's all on the head coach and the culture of their program. And if that is how you're going to treat a regular season, let's be honest, a regular season game that is meaningless in the grand scheme of this season, then you cannot win the national championship.
The real MVP, you have to stop right there. Because I understand that you're seeing this from an outsider standpoint. You're seeing this as a college football fan of another fan base. So you don't understand.
I understand it's the most intense rivalry. I understand this may be the most important game. But if it's the national championship game, and this is how you treat the national championship game for Ohio State, then when you actually get to the national championship game, Ohio State is not going to win it with him as the head coach.
I would say that their appearances on the biggest of stages, although not highly successful, some have been. They've played well. They've never played tight. They've never gotten blown out.
I mean, Mark, I don't take moral victories into account when I'm talking about Ohio State.
But no. I'm not taking moral victories into account either. But when you're talking about you're making a connection between tightness, choke artistry, and relating that, and you wouldn't have the type of outcomes that they've had. They would not have played as well if that's indicative of his teams all the time when they play the best competition.
Because
they wouldn't outplay Clemson in a playoff game and lose based on some bad calls. They wouldn't beat Clemson by 3 touchdowns in a playoff game. They wouldn't play Georgia down to a kick that would win the playoff game, right?
Listen, Mark, if you want
Am
to
I
be
right?
happy that you lose by 1 point, then I'll say you're right. Congrats. Ohio State can lose close games. I thought
No,
Ohio
I'm not
State's goal was to
saying
win
that
every game.
losing is acceptable. I'm saying that what you're accusing them of doesn't play out in those games.
What, they lose close to teams that they are
Then
equal
they're
in
not
the
playing
biggest
tight.
stages?
If they were playing the best team in the country, if they're playing tight and they're playing the best team in the country like they did Georgia 2 years ago, then they must surely be the best. They must be an NFL team.
Well, hold on. I don't think they played tight in the Georgia game, but they choked that game. They did choke
choked it
that
how?
game.
A kicker
They
missed
were
a
up
kick.
14 points.
A kicker missed a kick.
Yeah, he missed it badly too. It wasn't like he was just off.
Can Ryan Day?
He shanked
Can
it.
Ryan Day impact a field goal kick?
No, but his mentality is one of a choker because he shanked it.
I'm not saying that. Okay, I think you're going way too far in regards to the control that a head coach has over a team. He either has a good kicker or doesn't have a good kicker, and certainly there can be preparation for that throughout the season. But as Ryan Day calls for the field goal unit to go out onto the field, I don't think that his nervousness translates into the kicker and causes him to miss the kick.
I think it's possible because I think Ryan Day has focused 365 days on this game. And I think the kicker, when he goes out there, is like, oh my goodness, if I miss this kick, it's going to be complete disaster.
But see, based on what you're telling me right now, this is a criticism of Ryan Day, but critics of Ryan Day can't have it both ways. They can't say you're too obsessed with this game. You need to relax and not be obsessed with this game. And then his other critics say he doesn't take this game seriously enough. He needs to be more focused on this game and realize that this means everything. You can't have it both ways.
Right. Well, I don't know what I'm not the critics to trade, I'm not the critics trademark. I'm just me. I'm just telling you from what I've seen from watching Ohio State with Ryan Day. Anytime they play in a big spot or against a elite team, they lose close. That's just the perception I have.
Not every time. That's a perception. That's not every time, but
it's not every single time. But going into, let's say, the semifinal game this year or the national championship game, we're going to be like, man, if it's a close game, Ryan Day's going to figure out some way to blow it because that's just who they are.
And you might be right. He might get fired because of it. And if he gets fired, I'm okay with that.
He should get fired.
I'm okay with that. But let's understand, I think Ohio State fans, many, I speak in generalities, many will just think that that's the cure-all, that suddenly the next guy will have the magic pill and he will be the guy. He will be the next Urban Meyer. He will be Jim Tressel. The Michigan teams that Ryan Day has faced are better than the Urban Meyer teams that he faced and the Jim Tressel teams that he faced.
I understand that. But this year, you can't make that excuse. This year, this was one of the worst Michigan teams.
I'm not making an excuse. I'm stating a fact.
I understand. Okay, for 2021, 2022, 2023, that's fine. But this year's Michigan team is not a good football team. Honestly, if Ohio State scores 21 points in this game, Michigan doesn't have the capability of doing it. Davis Warren in the fourth quarter had a wide open tight end for a touchdown, and Jack Sawyer made an excellent play. If there's about 50, 60, 70 quarterbacks, though, that can just loft that ball over him. If they were decent on offense, Michigan blows out Ohio State this year. They just weren't decent enough on offense to do it, and they still found a way to win. I mean, if you can't beat them now in this year with this team after a massive rebuild, then I'm going to have a very, very hard time believing Ohio State's able to beat Michigan going forward.
So you need to be able to complete your mission here. So you're going to fire Ryan Day. And again, if Ohio State fires Ryan Day after whatever playoff loss they're going to suffer, after they lose to Tennessee by 35 points, and he gets fired the next day, I will not have an issue with that whatsoever. I will report on it. I will discuss it. I will discuss the pros and the cons, and I will discuss his accomplishments. I will discuss his failings, and then we will decide, or we will project and try to determine who's going to be the next coach and how good are they going to be.
A name I've seen a lot is Mike Vrabel. I don't know if you know him. He was a former NFL coach, head coach of the Tennessee Titans.
Are you kidding when you say that?
No, I'm being serious. That's
how would I not know who Mike Vrabel is?
Well, you said you haven't watched the NFL in
we should shut this stream down if I don't know who Mike Vrabel is. Mike Vrabel was an All-American at Ohio State.
They're saying he should be the next head coach of Ohio State.
Okay. Sure, he did a nice job at Tennessee for most of the time he was there.
Yeah, and they've completely collapsed without him.
From when I used to watch the NFL, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. They were a very hard-nosed team. They were a run-oriented team. Yeah.
So you like that pick? You like that name?
Yeah. I would not be, if Mike Vrabel got hired to be the next head coach at Ohio State, you would not hear me be on here criticizing it, nor would you hear me extolling it as the greatest hire in history. I would say, let's wait and see. This is a quality hire. It's a decent hire. It's understandable. The guy's an Ohio State man through and through, and he's been a successful head coach running an operation that is like an NFL operation, like Ohio State is. So absolutely. But would I be sold on it like they just hired Nick Saban in his prime or Urban Meyer in his prime? No. When they hired Urban Meyer, I went through the roof. My head hit the ceiling because I knew what that meant. I don't know that that would mean the same thing if they hired Mike Vrabel, but I would be fine with it.
Right. Well, I don't know if there's a guy like that out in the entire landscape outside of Kirby Smart where you can get him and think, I'm going to win a national championship going forward. I don't know if that guy exists.
But yes, if they fire Ryan Day, my head will hit the pillow and I will not lose one just microsecond of sleep.
What was Chip Kelly's offensive game plan? Was his plan to make it as difficult and painful as possible to watch the football game for all the fans? I mean, it looked like pulling teeth. I mean, you've got Ferraris.
So this is certainly where I will dive in with you on this, because Ryan Day has a job at Ohio State because he's an offensive mind, and this is how he earned his money and earned his way up the ranks, because he's a great offensive coach, and he is. Okay, the job of being the Ohio State head coach obviously just became too much. And even though he didn't want to give up play calling and coordinating the offense, he did. And so they break the bank, and they, along with everything else they did, and they bring in Chip Kelly. And hey, I applauded that move. Hey, Chip Kelly's great. And they work well together. They like each other. This should work out fine. He hands over the offense and now he can be CEO and Chip Kelly can run the offense. And I just thought, even if Chip Kelly doesn't add anything to this offense except for he can be super detailed and just run the offense and be an offensive coordinator, Ryan Day should just naturally be a better head coach, because of course he's going to be involved and know what's going on, but he can be a head coach. And Chip Kelly's I think he's the highest paid offensive coordinator in college football. But yeah, that game plan, as Joel Klatt criticized it a number of times, he was dead on. I think you have to be able to run the football to some degree. You have to keep the defense honest. They've got two excellent running backs. They've got a great backfield. I think they've got the best backfield in college football. But they weren't going to beat Michigan running the ball, just like they couldn't beat them last year running the ball. They needed to pass the ball about 70% of the time. That's what I would have done. And the Klatt even pointed out a number of times, even when they threw the ball, for some reason, they kept their wideouts in tight and had them be just extension of slot receivers. And with these tight formations, I don't know if Ryan Day got it in his head that they have to prove something by being the smash mouth team or something. They had mismatches all over the field that they rarely took advantage of.
I think the worst part of the game plan was when after Ohio State got a fantastic interception off Caleb Downs, he picked it off as the ball, and then they did a run up the middle, a reverse pass, and I forget the third down play, but it was atrocious as well. I mean, you had that entire and then they missed the field goal. I mean, that entire sequence to me just summed up the calamity of errors of the game. It honestly looked like Ohio State's goal was, how do we lose to this team? That's what it looked like.
Well, there's a theory out there.
What, that the mob influenced the game or something? What?
No, that they might as well just lose and play at home and avoid being the 1 seed and avoid playing a Big Ten championship game. I don't believe that.
Well, that's stupid because they're not even going to be the 5 seed now. They're probably dropped to this.
I don't believe that.
Right.
I think people are kidding or people are just stupid.
Right. If that conspiracy theory was true, then you would lose next week to Oregon, and then you would be the 5 seed. For Ohio State, also, if we look at the bigger picture of the season, the national championships odds for Ohio State has to go down significantly because they're projected to be the 7 or 8 seed, which means they're going to have to play in the second round the SEC team or the Big Ten team, championship team. That's so much harder than playing a Big 12 team and then Boise State.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and also, Mark, I know you love odd scenarios, so just a tangent for a moment. You realize Boise State could be the 3 seed this season?
So Boise State's going to be 12-1. Then let's say Clemson wins; they're 10-3.
Yeah, and that's all you need.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all you need. Boise State's the 3 seed.
Yeah, that is something that none of us would have ever imagined.
Right. So I just can't believe you all lost this game. Was this the worst loss Ohio State has ever suffered at the hands of Michigan, considering the gap between the two teams? Or does 1969 surpass this loss?
No, this is worse.
And why is that
the worst loss? Well, that Michigan team, even though they were a heavy underdog, they went on and played in the Rose Bowl. They were a really good team. They finished in the top 10 in the country. This Michigan team's not finishing in the top 10 in the country. This is the worst loss for Ohio State, also because you had Woody Hayes, who had won national championships, won many Big Ten championships. He already had 3 national championships or 4 national championships at that point, whatever the number was. So you had a well-established coach who was just adding to a great legacy as opposed to a guy that people are uncomfortable with and don't know if he can pull through in a big game. And Ohio State had just won the national championship the year before. They were the national champions. So it was just kind of devastating that everyone thought they were going to win another national championship. So yes, this is the worst loss. Is it the worst loss? Like I had somebody ask on the show we did this afternoon after the game, more personally for me. No, I will never suffer the worst loss. That will never be. That's in my past. When I was 10 years old, 12, 15, 20 years old, 25 years old, those were the losses that meant the most to me. So nothing will ever come anywhere close to those losses for me personally.
Right. A final thing I'll say about this is I thought Ohio State was obviously going to win. I was wrong. So I'll give a big congrats to all the Michigan people, John D'Adamo, Michigan Man, Mike G, Moose, all them people that have suffered this season and have stuck through it throughout thick and thin. They deserve all the credit and praise for still calling, still being active in the community, even though their team has been they've seen the rough times and now they're seeing the good times. So congrats to those people.
Yep. They should also recognize that if they've been listening to me, that I'm guessing that I gave their team more of a chance to win than they did.
Oh, I did too. I only gave them a 0.01% chance to win.
Well, I'm saying I gave their team a pretty significant chance. I laid out pretty much everything that we just saw today. I
Yeah,
laid
I
that out a
wouldn't be
number of
bragging
times. I
about
laid that
that.
out with Steve Dace, both here and on his show. I said, this is how you win the game. You got a front four that's going to stop the run, not allow Ohio State to do anything. It's just going to stone cold stop the line of scrimmage. You got that good of a front four. That mucks up a lot of things. And we've seen Will Howard make a mistake or two most games, and it doesn't affect them because they win by enough points. The special teams difference was significant. Well, you got maybe the best kicker in college football versus a guy that was, now you talk about converting, you talk about a guy freezing up, and again, maybe just a bad day, because I don't like to point at people and say that they choke, number one, because we're not in the arena. So I don't like to say somebody choked, because somebody's got to lose. Somebody misses free throws. Somebody misses field goal kicks, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody walks the bases loaded. This happens all the time. And that doesn't mean the same dude that hits the game-winning home run also strikes out with the bases loaded in another game. So that doesn't mean every time somebody fails under pressure that they choked. But this dude was 14 of 14 in field goal kicks at less than 40 yards, and he misses those two. So that's what happened there. And then the punting difference was astronomical. And I pointed those things out this week, that Michigan had an advantage in special teams.
Right. Now, I know I've talked heavy about the Michigan-Ohio State game, but Mark, there were other games on today.
Yes.
Everything I've seen from like the prediction websites and stuff believes South Carolina is going to be the final at-large team selected. Why should South Carolina get in over Alabama?
Well, it all depends on what your criteria is. If you have the approach that you're just going to eyeball it, and I just produced a video, just released it not that long ago, because I watched the Clemson South Carolina game at the same time I was watching the other game. And I sized it up as this. If you were just evaluating who's hot, who may be one of the best 12 teams in the country right now, then South Carolina's got a superstar in the making at quarterback, a really good running back. They've got a tremendous defensive front. They've got a tremendous defense. They're hot. They've beaten 4 ranked teams during a 6-game winning streak. They are the March Madness type team that you want to be in the field and don't want to play. But if you take it as logically, what the committee has set up for us is that Alabama's 13, Ole Miss is 14, and South Carolina's 15. And they all won their games this weekend to go to 9-3. Now, if they didn't have any connection to each other, then you would say, well, South Carolina just beat the 12th ranked team in the country. That elevates them past the other two who beat marginal or bad teams. So that makes total sense. However, they all played. Therefore, I cannot in good conscience elevate a team that lost to 2 other teams and has the same record past those 2 teams, especially when they lost to one of them by 24 points at home. And they all play in the same conference and play similar schedules. I can't do that.
Well, Mark, you can't, but I believe the committee's going to do, because there's a reason everyone's saying South Carolina and predicting them is in the field, and Alabama's got very little chance in the field. There's a reason for that being the case. Something else I'll ask you about is Miami. What have they got to do to win the ACC, Mark? I mean, my goodness. SMU's going to win the ACC possibly in year 1.
That's funny. That's funny. That's funny when you really let it sink in that way. Miami entered the ACC just a couple of years removed from this huge dynasty run, and they joined the ACC. And if you would have told me back in 2004, I believe was the year when they joined the ACC, that they would not have an ACC championship, that they had only been to one conference championship game, and SMU would come out of the group of 5 and be playing in the ACC. It's just that's pathetic. That is an indictment on that program. It's pathetic, and it should be a huge embarrassment to them.
You know what's even more disappointing and sad is they were up 21-0 in that game.
Yeah,
21-0.
Syracuse. They were playing a Syracuse team that beat Connecticut by a touchdown last week.
Connecticut's good. They're 8-4, Mark. They had an amazing game against UMass today. I'm sure you were just locked in on that UConn-UMass game.
I did see that it was high scoring. That's all I know.
Yeah, it was like 45 something. But let me ask you this. The 5 seed, the most important seed throughout the college football playoff. If Texas loses to Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, or Penn State for the 5 seed.
How close does Penn State play Oregon?
14 points.
Oh, Texas.
And if it's like Texas, Georgia last time where Georgia dominates them?
I hate to reward Notre Dame not playing in a conference and not exposing themselves to losing a conference championship game. I hate that. If all things were even and just for some reason Notre Dame played one less game, if this was 1990 and they just happened to play one less game than the other two, then that would just be one less data point for me. And I would just match up the schedules. But Notre Dame is not exposing itself to a conference championship game. Therefore, they have to, in my eyes, be overwhelmingly the team to place in the number 5 or the number 1 at-large spot.
Okay. And is this just a combination of the 13th game? Or is some of this, the loss they've taken is so significantly worse than the teams we're talking about that it kind of removes them from the situation?
Well, I think that's it too, because while Notre Dame's looked impressive since then, and they've had a high level of game control, and I've seen all sorts of Notre Dame pundits throw on social media their game control metrics are better than everybody else's since week 3 or whatever the time frame that is, especially selected to enhance the Notre Dame resume. Yeah, that's an egregious loss. And it's not like, okay, they lost to Northern Illinois and, or Alabama lost to Northern Illinois. Then they stepped into the SEC and they ripped off 4 consecutive wins against ranked opponents. Notre Dame did what they needed to do. They took care of their schedule, but they were defending the goal line with 4 minutes left by a touchdown against USC. They were up 35-28, and USC was throwing the ball in the end zone with 4 minutes left to play. It's not like they are just trouncing really good teams. They're not.
My counter argument to that would be, just for devil's advocate, would be Penn State, I believe, played worse against the same USC team than Notre Dame has.
Yeah, but not by much.
Okay.
Yes, the final score looks better because they had 2 pick sixes in the last 4 minutes of the game.
Right. One game also did go to overtime and the other one didn't.
Yes.
I mean, that is...
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree with you. They did. Yep.
Okay. So you understand, if it's Notre Dame, Texas, and Penn State is projected currently to be above Ohio State. Do you believe that should be the case, even with the loss discrepancy, or do you think the head should override that?
I think that for now, Penn State should be ahead of Ohio State. But once Penn State plays Oregon, then we will have 2 important data points. We will have head-to-head, and we will have them both play a game against Oregon. And if Oregon was only good enough to beat Ohio State by 1 point with all the scenario, we know what it was, balls in field goal range, 1 second left, blah, blah, blah. It's basically a tie game is what it is, versus they beat Penn State by 2 touchdowns. Then no, Ohio State's got a better resume.
Okay. Well, Mark, I'll have you my condolences tonight for your tough loss. There's always next year, Mark, I guess. But
There's December 20th is what there is.
okay.
There is December 20th.
Fair enough. Good luck beating Indiana or Tennessee then. That'll satisfy your needs.
No, they would have to win more games than that to satisfy me. But all right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Next up, we've got Nick on the line. Nick, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
I got you.
Awesome. So I'm a longtime listener, second time caller. I'm also a Michigan fan. I just wanted to,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, I listen to you and Steve Dace a lot, and I was a little bit more kind of feeling how Steve was feeling. So to have this win was a kind of a shock to me. And I feel like the game stayed close, and I still kind of felt like at some point Ohio State was going to bust it open.
Yep.
And so I was just kind of mentally preparing myself for that.
Sure.
And I know this was kind of late in the game, but about 3.5 minutes left when uh, Kalal Mullins broke that third down. I think it was third down run that initially looked like probably a 2-yard loss turned into, I think, something like a 17 or 20-yard gain, something like that. That's when not only did they put we were in field goal range at that point, but to me it was almost a little bit more symbolic of like, okay, well, this is a legitimate we're in a legitimate point where we could be winning this game. And it reminded me a lot of like that final drive in 2021 with Hassan Haskins.
Yeah.
Now it was different score, different. I mean, the situation was different, but it was just more of the oozing of the grit and the heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
when I saw when Kalel Mullings had that run, that's when I'm like, okay, this is starting to feel a little different. And then of course the game ended up playing out that way. So I was really happy to see that. But I just wanted to say that I as a Michigan fan, I hear a lot about I hear a lot of the Ryan Day is soft narrative, and I don't agree with that. I think maybe some of that is just part of the rhetoric of the rivalry, and that's fine if that's the case. Um, but I don't believe that for one bit. I think he's easily a top three coach in college football, especially after Harbaugh and Saban left. And you could make an argument, from a Saturday to Saturday standpoint, he's number one. Um, And I think he's stuck in that psychological trap of Michigan. And I feel for him in a way because Michigan was in that same trap five
Yeah.
years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Harbaugh was in that. Brady Hoke was in that. I don't know about Rich Rod. He was kind of outside the rivalry coming in.
Yeah.
But Brady Hoke and Harbaugh certainly were in that. And I think it was what 8 consecutive wins Ohio State had over Michigan, plus probably a ninth win if the COVID game wasn't canceled. Um, and so I've heard previous Michigan players talk about the psychological aspect of that rivalry and how it really when things aren't going your way, especially late in the game, that doubt starts to creep in. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think Ryan Day is basically kind of in that he's in that trap, but I don't think that equates to being soft. I don't think he's soft at all. I think he coaches, I mean, obviously one of the most talented and generally one of the best coach teams in college football. But when it comes to the Michigan game, as we've seen in the last 4 years, he tends to kind of get out of some of his positive tendencies and he either plays kind of tight or almost not to lose instead of to win. Um, and then I think the last caller, I was having a hard time understanding his take on Ryan Day, but I didn't agree when he said that Ryan Day was um, someone that doesn't win the big game. When I think it was what 2022, right, when they played Georgia,
Yeah.
and that was one of the best college football games I've ever watched. And you were right that you pointed out that I mean, if it wasn't for the missed kick, they would have been playing TCU the next week. So um, I don't agree with the idea that Ryan Day is a soft coach, that he loses the big games. I think there's a different coach in the Big Ten of a top 10 team that could maybe have a little bit more of that criticism with James Franklin. But Ryan Day, not so much. I really think it's just more of a Michigan problem. And he, coached a really good game against Georgia in 2022. And I don't even know, you would know this if I don't know if Ryan Day's ever lost to James Franklin. Is that right?
No, he is not.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't think so. Um, so really, that's just the biggest thing I wanted to say is as a Michigan fan, I just couldn't disagree more about the Ryan Day is soft narrative. I think he's an outstanding coach. He's stuck, and Harbaugh was stuck too. It took him 5 years um, to 6 games really to get out of that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if they stick it out with Ryan Day, it eventually will swing. I mean, of course, as a Michigan fan, I hate saying that, but I do think eventually it's going to swing. Uh, and and the last thing I'll say, and I'll kind of hand it over to you, is that um, he is. I don't know if you move on from Ryan Day because, as you said, who do you get that's better? I mean, his record is outstanding. It's really just the Michigan problem, and eventually, I do think the law of averages. I mean, he's going to break through, and once you win that one game, that doubt and that psychological trap, it starts to melt away. And so, and if anything, it swings the other way. Now, Sharon Moore and the folks in Ann Arbor have to kind of deal with that big bad Buckeye in the room, 365 days a year, like we did for 8 seasons. Um, and so I just think that eventually it's going to swing that way. And I hate to say that, but I think it will. I thought it was going to be this year. I think most people did. I was wrong. We were wrong, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think eventually Ryan Day would have like that breakthrough? Do you agree with that, or do you have a little bit more concern?
Well, to go through a lot of the things that you just said, one thing comes to mind, and it doesn't. Even though I know these scores and these streaks, and obviously deal with those numbers all the time, I can tell you every score in the series and all that business. It doesn't always settle in that okay, Michigan's won 4 consecutive games here. Ohio State did win 8 in a row. And I'm not excusing losing with the interim coach Luke Fickell in 2011. But if you just take the actual head coaches at Ohio State, Tressel, Meyer, Day, they won from 2004 on. They didn't lose a game. So that's what, 2004 through 19, that's 16 in a row. Because
Yeah,
Day won his first one, Meyer won 7 straight, Tressel won his last 8 in a row. So, yeah. So, anyway, you make a great point about Jim Harbaugh. Uh, Jim Harbaugh made the statement at Big Ten Media Days the year that they eventually did beat Ohio State that we're going to beat Ohio State or I'm going to die trying. And fortunately for him, they broke through. But at the time, it didn't seem like it was going to happen. It seemed like,
mhm,
okay, this guy might be saying this 5 years from now. He might be 0-9, but he broke through and won. But like you say, if we were holding Jim Harbaugh to the same standard as Ryan Day, and on Jim Harbaugh's side, he took over a much worse program than Ryan Day did, of course. So he needed to be given more time. On the other hand, if we just flat out looked at records, there was no comparison between Ryan Day's record and Jim Harbaugh's record. So if we were going to say, oh, Jim Harbaugh's got this many wins and this many losses, and his record against Ohio State's 0-5, well, he should get fired. Um, who knows what would have ever happened, who they would have hired, and how well that person would have done against Ohio State, and if they would have ever broken through. But from a psychology standpoint, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I've said this before, that Ohio State had the same psychological advantage over Michigan that Michigan now has over Ohio State. But I got to think that once that's broken, so when Ohio State and Michigan hit the field in 2021, and all those Ohio State players had never lost to Michigan, and the Michigan players had never beaten Ohio State, and there was that psychological advantage. But I would think once that's broken, it really heavily turns against the individuals that had it, because they may have assumed it or thought, uh-oh, now this team has confidence and they're no longer afraid of us. They're no longer lacking confidence. So once it was broken, it snapped the other way.
Yeah, and I think if Ryan Day is to snap this rivalry, I feel like it would have to happen in a similar way that it happened for Michigan. So, there's been a lot of content out there, breakdowns about how Jim Harbaugh was able to do that, but Jim Harbaugh was really only a slice of the pie. I mean, he just happened to also have remarkable leaders on that roster: Aiden Hutchinson, Hassan Haskins, Cade McNamara, Blake Corum. You had outstanding juniors, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, who basically just kind of put their foot down with the team and said enough's enough, and brought them, guided them to that win. And so I feel like it would make sense that Ryan Day would almost have to do the same thing. And there's no shortage of talent, and honestly, there's probably no shortage of leadership. I'm not as familiar with the um, from 1 to 85 or whatever it is, of Ohio State's roster, but I'm aware of like their top 25, as you've called them. Um, Super talented. They always are talented, and I'm sure there's leaders, and Michigan had leaders too. But it just took something remarkable with the combination of Hutchinson and McNamara and Haskins and company, with Harbaugh, kind of backing them, to bring about that change. And so, there's no predicting who that would be for Ohio State. We don't even know if those players are on the roster. They could be freshmen and sophomores who, or even juniors who, next year kind of are those same players that lead that kind of that turning wave. So, um, yeah, it's just I don't know. Again, I'm pretty pleased with the victory today. I'm shocked. I couldn't
Sure.
believe it when Khalil Mullings broke that run that I thought was a 2-yard loss. And I just kind of I looked at my wife and said, I think we're gonna do it. And it was very exciting. I had one last question for you. Um, so in the last 10 years, I mean, Michigan's only been winning this game the last 4 years, so maybe even just keeping it to the last 4 years. Is there a player or players, especially in particular on defense for Michigan, that stand out as having legacy games against Ohio State? I think the first that comes to mind is probably Aiden Hutchinson. But I guess what I'm really kind of nudge you towards is getting your opinion on Mason Graham, who I know didn't have he's not, just because of the position he plays, he's going to be less splashy than
Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson or Jabril Peppers, although Peppers never won. Um, but I feel like he had kind of a legacy game here. If you kind of, and maybe you paid attention to it or other people did, but I always watch him. I'm a big Mason Graham fan, so I'm always kind of keeping a third eye on him during the play. And
Yep.
it just seemed like play after play, he was around the ball, and then sometimes he was just flat out disruptive, and he was making those flashy plays. Um, did his performance, or even maybe somebody else's performance who I didn't mention, stand out today as like a defensive legacy game, especially since Ohio State was held to 10 points?
Well, like you say, unless a defensive player stands out on the play as making the tackle for loss or making the pass break up, I don't immediately notice that guy unless I'm watching them on replay. So there were a few times on replay. There was one play that stands out in particular where Mason Graham, he just made the guard just completely whiff. He ran around him and was quick enough to run around him and kind of give him a swim move and just make him whiff and run around him to the outside and still grab the ball carrier and stuff him in a key situation. I don't remember what down it was or distance, but it was a key situation in the fourth quarter. That play comes to mind.
Yeah, I do remember that that exact play. I know what you're thinking of. I think if I remember right too, Joel Klatt spotlighted him on that afterward, just to kind of show the viewers that what a great play that was. Does he stand out to you as maybe the best defensive tackle that Michigan ever put on the field? I know that's maybe saying a lot, just because I know there's been a lot of good ones, but he just seems to. I can't think of anyone.
Wow.
Alan Branch, Maurice Hurst.
Alan Branch. Yes. Maurice Hurst. Yeah. Remember those guys? It's hard for me to really make a comparison off the top of my head, having not thought about those guys for years.
Right. Alan Branch holds a special spot in my heart because that's when I first started watching football. And so I saw him live. I forget who they played, but that was that 2006 year. And he had just kind of, he had taken over the game, he and Lamar Woodley. So I've always those two have always stood out to me just as part of my childhood. But
sure.
I feel like Mason Graham
played for the Cardinals, I believe.
Yes. He was drafted in the second round. And I don't know if I want to use the draft as like the barometer of the impact of a player, but I think it's a pretty strong data point. And so Mason Graham, I think, is certainly projected as a top 15 pick and could even potentially go in the top 10 or 5. And so I think that is a pretty strong indicator that from a legacy standpoint, he's going to probably be the most decorated defensive tackle to ever come out of Michigan, but I could be wrong. I'm not a historian with Michigan, so maybe someone is cursing me right now for someone in the 70s or 80s who was pretty good too. But yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on Mason Graham and his impact today, and if it was maybe a legacy game for him or if it was just a little bit more of a team effort on defense.
Yeah, there's really nothing that come to mind. Obviously, the Makari Page hit on Will Howard, and then also the break he made on the ball to make the interception in the red zone inside the 10-yard line were two key plays. The pick that Will Howard was standing in the end zone, and I just had a bad feeling he was going to throw a pick on that play because, and then when you saw it on replay, it seemed so obvious. Not that it's easy to see watching it on a replay, but that Ohio State's obviously throwing the ball and it's 3rd and 8 roughly, and we know exactly where the sticks are. And I don't know if Jair Hill was processing it like this, but the likelihood that any team is going to throw against that defensive front is going to throw an out and up pattern and waste all that time for such a low percentage play on a 3rd and 9 that he had to know this is his route. He's not taking me deep. And Carnell Tate ran a very lazy route, and Hill saw it coming all the way and stepped in front and picked it off. And obviously, that was Michigan's touchdown drive right there. Their 4-yard touchdown drive. Michigan won the game with a 4-yard touchdown drive. And that's the kind of game that they were going to win. If they were going to win, that's the kind of game that they were going to win.
Yeah, and I think that this game, without a doubt, puts the fire Sharon Moore stuff to rest.
Sure.
There's truth to the. I forget if it was Woody Hayes or Bo Schembechler. I think it was Woody Hayes who said that. I mean, winning this game is everything. So I mean, it can completely change the narrative of a season, and it certainly did. And then there's a lot of teams that run the scenarios in your head. Would you rather have a great season and lose to that other rivalry team, or would you rather have a poor season and win? And that's exactly what we saw today on two sides of it, And so I think every Ohio State player, coach, and fan would say we'd rather have that, we'd rather have that win even if it meant we had a couple losses, if we came in at 7-5, 8-4, or 7-4, 8-3. So, but anyway, that's all I have for you, Mark. I'll let you move on to other callers and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Well, thanks for calling, Nick. Call back anytime.
Will do. Thank you.
So I'd like to address this comment on the screen, because once I get rid of these comments on the screen, then they're gone and I can't find them anyway. So Toes to Kane says, Mark, y'all ain't winning another game this year. That's it for you guys. Well, if you would pardon me, I am going to be foolish here and not necessarily take your word for it. I will just go ahead and actually watch the games and allow Ohio State to play a playoff game. And I will give them a minimal, maybe 1 or 2% chance of winning that game. So sorry, I apologize for possibly refuting your comment of guaranteed certainty that Ohio State could. There is absolutely no possible way that they could ever dream of winning another game against the likes of Penn State or Tennessee or Notre Dame or somebody. So I understand, while I'm wishing and hoping and praying for the complete impossible to happen, a complete miracle, just allow me just that small bit of hope that Ohio State could possibly win a game against the likes of somebody like that. So just let me dream a little bit that Ohio State could possibly win, because 2 years ago, after they lost to Michigan, I thought, at least my initial thought was, now as the game starts to come up later, I always have, and this is the fan in me, but it's also Ohio State producing the best record in the country over the history of the program. So I was born in a certain state. I didn't choose them so much as they chose me. That I do root for the team that's got the best winning percentage of all time. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the expectancy of winning every game. I don't expect that they're going to lose any game. Like I cannot tell you the last time I thought Ohio State's going to lose this game. So when they matched up against Georgia 2 years ago, my initial thought was they just got knocked out of the playoff when they lost to Michigan. And then things fell their way. USC lost. That's all that had to happen. And then when they got the matchup against Georgia, my initial thought was, wow, man, they are playing the best team in the country. And this team is by far the best team in the country. They just wiped the floor with Michigan last year. And this is the best team in the country. They are the defending champions. They're ultra confident. And I know Ohio State can compete with them athletically, but oh my goodness, they're going to be a psycho case. They're going to be a head case going into that game playing Georgia. They probably have no confidence. What kind of confidence could they possibly have playing that game? Well, within a couple of weeks, I started to gain a little bit more confidence, thinking, no, they can get there. These college kids are resilient. And they went out there and played down to the final play of the game against what was, I believe, clearly the best team in the country. So again, toes to Kane. I am going to be just completely foolish, and you'll just have to pardon me for ignoring your great and mighty wisdom, that I will just hold on to that 1% of hope that Ohio State could possibly win a playoff game. For as unlikely as that is, and that they will probably be given little chance by Vegas as some kind of like 25-point underdog against the likes of one of these teams, that I'm just going to hold out hope that they could possibly pull off some kind of miracle. All right. So if you do anything the rest of this day, please subscribe to our Ole Miss channel. So we've got an Ole Miss channel, and this is what happens here at the Voice of College Football is we create these channels, and we go out and we look for the best people to host at these channels. Like while we are talking right here, who knows how many other post games we get going. I used to be able to keep track of all of them. I can't anymore. I do know that Chad and Tyranny, they're a great couple, and they are doing Oklahoma post game for us. And so after the LSU game, they are on live, and they're probably done by now. But Ole Miss is our focus right now. So please subscribe to the Ole Miss channel. We would like to get that to 1,000 subs because YouTube will then take it seriously, and that helps the growth of the channel. So we do an Ole Miss show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time with myself and with Leanne Herring and Ruby Dreher. And we think it's a pretty good show. We know it's a good show, and it's a fun time. And so please join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time for the Ole Miss show on the Ole Miss channel. And in the meantime, please subscribe, and I will drop that link in the chat. All right, let's get to our next call. And we've got Michael on the line. Michael, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, 10:34 was the time of death for Purdue football tonight.
10:34. Is that Eastern or Central?
Eastern.
Eastern, 10:34 Eastern.
But I really can go back to September 14th if you want me to.
Yeah, was that the second game of the season?
Yeah.
No, that was the third game of the season.
No.
Oh, they had a bye?
Yeah, I had a bye in between.
They had a bye. So, yeah, you should have shut it down after defeating Indiana State 49-0.
Yeah, and we're the number one team in the country. We're going to see if okay, I got to ask you this. What happened today, I cannot believe, with Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M, Florida State, North Carolina State. What is up with these knuckleheads? And can the conferences do anything about it?
What? I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay. But it was pretty much everything that happened, like at the end of the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Yeah, what about it?
It also happened before the games with Texas A&M.
Oh, you're talking about players fighting.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Got it. So it happened at the Alabama-Auburn game to some extent. And then, yes, Ohio State, Michigan. And it happened at the Texas A&M game.
Yeah, North Carolina State tried to do the same thing.
Okay.
After the game, what Michigan tried to do. And then also, I think it was Florida State also.
Oh, so all these happened with the road team winning the game and then planting some kind of flag
well,
or
no,
doing
the
whatever.
players.
Oh,
no, there was something before the game with Texas A&M and Texas, and then most of the Texas players was trying to go to logo, Texas A&M logo at the end of the game, but started calling them to get their butts off the logo.
yeah. It's basically in our society we are raising men to not necessarily be men, but to think that they're men and to be macho in ways that aren't like meaningful. I think that's a lot of it. So there's a lot of false vibrato out there from a lot of people. And we're not raising men to be men in the sense that they protect women and that they do manly things, that they do false vibrato things and talk about how tough they are and how great they are. And they got big mouths. And these are the kind of things they do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was kind of surprised. Not really in a way. I figured points would have been hard to get tonight during the game, but I did say it was going to be hard to do during the Michigan-Ohio State game. When did you realize that was going to be a slugfest as far as the defenses?
Well, I didn't think it was going to be a slugfest to that degree, but I thought it was going to be a relatively I thought it was going to be a very close game, and I thought Ohio State would probably pull away at some point in the fourth quarter. I thought it would be maybe a tie game or close to a tie game at halftime, and then Ohio State would make some plays and win the game.
Yeah. All right. Nice jacket, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy putting this on. I haven't had to wear a jacket I haven't had a jacket on in like 7 months. And so, yeah, it got a little chilly here. in the last day or two. So I put myself, got my top 25 that actually makes sense. And so that's a good plug for the show. I am looking at, I'm sorry to bring this up, Michael, but I'm looking at the Purdue box score.
Oh, yeah.
That is pitiful. They had 67 yards of total offense.
Yes.
Wow. That's crazy.
I don't know when the last time they had a game like that. Probably before we was both born.
And they gave up 582 yards of total offense. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That actually makes it look like they just, I know that they're bad, but I don't think they're that bad. This looks like they gave up.
Yeah. But like I said, though, like with what IU did tonight, I mean, I know Coach Tiller and Coach and did that before in the past, but hey, I can't control what Kurt Signetti does, man, like that. But I've seen like if you was IU, when would you have called the dogs off, or would you have kept adding on to the score?
No, that's not my style. I would not have added on. That doesn't mean I would have took a knee. It also depends on what kind of team I had. This is the last game of the season, so yeah, I would pack it in. But if it was earlier in the season and my team had things to work on, I wouldn't. These guys they're grown-ups, they're competitive athletes, they should be able to take it. So I would take more kind of a medium. I wouldn't just, okay, here we go. We'll tell you that we're running off tackle every play and giving up, but I'm also not running trick plays and trying to shove it down their throats. I would run the offense and I would run the play clock. But earlier in the season, I would work on things because that's your best practice possible. But this being the last game of the season, I would pack it up as early as possible.
All right, I got to ask you this. How far does Ohio State fall and how far does Miami fall?
Oh, wow. I haven't gone through this, but let's see. Give me a little slack here because I might be off because I'm just doing this off the top of my head. And I'll produce a video with a prediction of this. But Oregon's going to be number 1 and Texas is going to be 2. Penn State's going to be 3. Notre Dame is going to be 4. Huh.
Georgia 5?
Yeah, Georgia will be 5. And then,
I see Ohio State falling to 6. I see Miami.
They're going to make a decision between Tennessee and Ohio State, I guess. Maybe Tennessee 6 and Ohio State 7.
Okay, but who's 8th?
Then we'll put probably SMU at 8. And Miami was 6. Do they only fall to 9? Who else was there? No, we'll put Indiana will be 9, and then Miami will fall to 10.
That's what I'm thinking.
Who else do we have? Alabama, Ole Miss. I guess then it goes 11th? Alabama, Ole Miss.
Who's 11th? I mean,
Boise. Boise will they might stay ahead of either Miami's 10 and Boise 11 or vice versa. Say Boise 11. Then I think Bama's going to be at 12 and Ole Miss at 13. And maybe South Carolina was behind those two, but they really like South Carolina. So maybe they move ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss.
But regardless, though, whoever's 12th is going to be on the outside looking in still, right?
Yes, because we got a Big 12 team that's going to be in there too.
The question is who's going to be? I mean, can Colorado still play for the Big 12 championship?
Well, let's check the score of the
24-10.
So BYU wins that game, then Iowa State is playing Arizona State in the championship game.
Okay, I was just wondering stuff like that because I was hoping it could have been Colorado, but it is what it is. Though, so no, I was just wondering stuff like that. But no, like I said, I was just trying to figure out stuff like that. So, how impressed was you with Texas tonight?
Well, considering I only saw them make a goal line stand, I was very impressed with that. I was not impressed with Mike Elko running the same play 4 times in a row. I
Yeah,
was not
true.
impressed with that. I thought that was stupid.
True.
And I think Mike Elko is a great coach. So I don't know. I don't know if you heard me say this. It was one of the first things I said when I came on, that I thought it was awfully strange that Texas A&M scored to make it 17-7. And then they drive down the field. They get down to the half-yard line. It's 17-7. There's about 5 minutes left. So they're about to make it 17-14. They run the ball right straight at Texas's defense 3 times in a row and just get stoned, just blasted. And so then they call a timeout. And so for me at that point, the decision is, do they kick the field goal to get within 7 and then try to get the ball back, and then they got to score a touchdown, or do they go for it? You're at the half-yard line, and if you score a touchdown, then it's 17-14, and then the next time you get the ball, you only have to kick a field goal to go to overtime, or you can win the game with the touchdown. So I would have gone for it, and they did go for it. But they had a timeout to devise their best play possible. And all they did was another dive right into the line, right over the center, and bam.
I'm still trying to figure out, for the life of me, why does the team still do that instead of trying to go outside? Or do like a jet
when
sweep?
You've got a quarterback who is very fast. I don't understand it myself.
Mm-hmm. But no, like I was going to say, though, I'm still trying to figure out how some people in here think that that Miami's going to fall out and stuff like that of the top 12, and I don't see that happening and stuff like that. But I could be wrong, though. So
yeah, that's a great question, because they lost to a decent Syracuse team that finished its season 9-3 today.
Yep. Sure. Oh, let me ask you this: if if SMU wins next week, will they leapfrog? Will Miami leapfrog Clemson again? Since that'll be their 3rd loss of the season.
Yes. Will Clemson leapfrog? No, Miami leapfrog Clemson. Got it. I think that if Clemson loses substantially, yes. But if Clemson, see, this is where things get tricky. So let's go to the Big Ten. Penn State's got a better record than Ohio State. But Ohio State had to play the number 1 team in the country, and Penn State didn't. And Ohio State had to play them on the road, and of course, they only lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
So should Penn State really be ranked ahead of Ohio State? So my thinking is, for now, sure, put them in front of Ohio State, because Ohio State lost to a 6-5 team. But of course, Ohio State beat them head to head, but Ohio State's 10-2, Penn State's 11-1. But if Penn State cannot play Oregon as well as Ohio State did, plus they lost to Ohio State, if they lose to Oregon, let's say 35-21, well, they better be ranked below Ohio State. They'll both have 2 losses, and Ohio State beat them head to head, plus they played a better game against Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I see the situation you just laid out. That if Clemson goes, and even if they lose, but they just played the conference champion who's 9-0 in the conference and play them extremely close, they actually shouldn't be penalized for that. They're actually confirming their ranking. They're actually justifying their ranking. Mm-hmm. But if they lose to SMU 34-17, then sure, drop them.
Yeah. Now, what happens if I'm with 70,000 plus people next Saturday night in Lucas Oil Stadium and Penn State shocks the world?
Well, they're not going to shock me. You're going to be shocked if the number 3 team in the country beats the number 1 team in the country?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I was just asking. I mean, how
What do
far
you mean
would?
what happens? Then they might be number one, or Texas would be number one.
Mm. So, how are you liking the chances for Texas against in the rematch?
Oh, I think they've got a good shot. I think they have a really good shot. Georgia did not play well last night. I give them a lot of credit for coming back and winning the game and gutting out a win, but they didn't play well.
Mm-hmm. Not bad, but no, I'll go say so. That's on the what is that like a fleece zip or something, or is that like a kind of like a fall jacket you wear?
Oh, I didn't know what you were talking. It's I don't know what. I love this jacket though. I know as soon as I got it, our buddy Joey sent it to me. He ordered all this stuff, and when he sent it to me, I love wearing this jacket.
Speaking of Joey, how's he doing, by the way?
Joey is hanging in there. He's
I know he has him and
he's
his
a
wife have
trooper.
some health issues and stuff. That's
Yes,
what I
he
was
does.
asking.
Yes, he does.
All
But
right.
yeah, I still talk to Joey every week or two.
Well, give him my best next time we talk to him and stuff like that.
I
But
will.
is that on the merchandise page of the Voice of College Football?
That's a great question. Let's give that a look right now. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know if I can even. I don't even know if I can find it.
8:34 to go, and I guess it's a one-score game for BYU.
Okay, well, we got some drama going on there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Michael. Anything else?
Other than that, that's it. See you in about 10 hours. Even though I still think maybe you should skip a Sunday just to get some sleep sometime.
Well, it's mighty important these days to get these shows in because this is why we're here all year. We're down to the nitty gritty.
Yep, not bad. And I hope you would consider it next week though, because I know you did. Like I said, I brought it up to you earlier this week. Hopefully, you can maybe do a live stream during one of the conference championship games.
Oh, do a live stream, do a watch party.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to get used to ABC doing the SEC championship next week.
Oh yeah, and CBS has the Big Ten championship. Yeah.
Yeah, how does that switch from Fox though? Or is it a rotating deal?
Yeah, they have some kind of rotation between Fox, NBC, and CBS.
Not bad, but tip of the cap to Ohio State for a great season. And I wish there was a couple people who's Ohio State fans would come out of the woodwork to admit that they was wrong today. And they know who they are, but they haven't seen them in the stream yet.
Yeah, well, I don't have any issue if people don't feel like if they're disappointed and don't feel like showing up on a particular day. That's fine. But I do get your point that if people are going to brag about how great their team is and that they're going to smoke some other team by 50 points or whatever, then they should show up. That's why I thought it was funny. I showed up after the Ohio State game and
I caught that. You was in a pretty frank discussion with Mr. Fort, man. I thought I was going to have to try to get in there to break him, but I couldn't find the link to get in earlier.
Well, I didn't intend on doing that, but I just thought, okay, well, this is obviously a huge game, and let's just talk about it. So that was not my intent until there was about 2 minutes left in the game.
Yep, fair enough. Then, all right, nice win for Notre Dame today, by the way.
Oh yeah, it sure was.
Yep. All right, Mark. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you, Michael.
Give Joey my best, man, and his wife.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Yep.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. And I make this statement from time to time and let everyone know that our promo time, the time that we devote to promotions here at the Voice of College Football is just minimal. We give you folks just content all the time, just analysis and content and discussion, debate all the time. But we need to take few minutes for some promotions here. ESPN does that about 50% of the time. So, Disputed National Champions. It's a book about the 1990s, but it's not stuck in the 1990s. So I dissect the storylines, the season, the results, the postseason, the decisions, the votes from every season of the 1990s. And then I talk about the impact of that particular season, its legacy on college football. And then I take the results from every season in the 1990s, 1990, 91 through 1999, and I plug it into the BCS era, the 4-team college football playoff era, the 12-team, and the proposed 14-team. Like, I had this baby written, and then they started talking about a 14-team playoff, so I added that. So give it a look. I believe that you will enjoy it, and it is but $9.99. And you can grab it there on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and look up Disputed National Champions, or go to the link in the description section of the video that we are currently on. All right, folks, we got John showing up here at the Voice of College Football. John, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Having a rough night, but I'll get through it.
Because you're an Ohio State fan.
Not just. I'm missing my daughter. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you were referring to.
Because I am Ohio State fan. But I did watch. I missed your show right after the game. But I just got done watching. Mike, is that his name? Mike Ford.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard the James Franklin comparison, and I'm glad you said something to kind of shut that down. How he said Ryan Day was another James Franklin. I couldn't believe that when he even said that. And then you said, you do know they play each other a lot, right?
Yes. Yes, he's James Franklin, except for they played every year since 2019, and therefore Ryan Day's 6-0 against James Franklin.
Yeah.
Among other things.
And I do want to I wanted to address something. What I keep seeing in this chat is Ohio State can't win big games, and it's just kind of annoying every year that, these last couple of years. I understand Michigan fans, you guys have the right to gloat. Congratulations. But I mean, it's like they forget the national championship we won, the way we just walked up and down the field on Clemson. We were a missed kick away from beating Georgia, a missed kick and a dirty hit on Marvin Harrison Jr. away from beating Georgia. Now, granted, I know we got our losses to Michigan, and we got our losses to teams like Virginia Tech and Purdue and Iowa and Alabama. But to say that Ohio State can never win the big games, it's a little annoying.
Well, if you're going to bring up losses to teams like Iowa and Purdue, then you need to bring up all the losses Michigan has, because Michigan has the bragging rights right now. There's no denying that.
No,
although Ohio State still has a better team, and they have played a better season, so they're having a better season. Let's not forget Ohio State's going to the playoffs right now, and Michigan's going to the Music City Bowl or something. 7-5. So yes, they have the bragging rights of winning the game. And hey, I remember many Ohio State years in my past when Jim Tressel in his first year went 7-5 and beat Michigan, and that was the greatest thing in the world to me. So I get it. I'm not discounting that, but
no, I'm not either.
Yeah, if you bring up like losing to Iowa and Purdue in 2017 and 2018, well, Ohio State still has the best record in the Big Ten Conference, and it's not even close in the last 10 years. So, yeah, it's not comparable.
Yeah, Michigan lost to Minnesota this year.
No, Michigan did not lose to Minnesota.
Well, who was the big game that Minnesota won? What was that? It was a nail biter. I was watching it. I can't remember who they beat, but it was like a nail bar, or maybe that was the Illinois game. I don't remember. But sorry. Um, I wanted to bring up the 2-loss comparisons between Ohio State, Georgia. Oh, and I seen someone in the chat saying that the committee should not punish Penn State for playing an extra game. If Penn State gets walloped, I'm with you, Mark.
Sure.
If Penn State gets walloped by Oregon, you're not going to sit there and tell me, that Penn State shouldn't be punished for that.
Exactly.
Like, yes, they're playing an extra game, but you go out there and look like Wisconsin against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game.
You're comparing two teams that actually played each other, and then they played the best team in the country. And one of them, sure, is 11-2 and one's 10-2, but whoop-de-doo, big deal. 10-2, 11-2 doesn't matter compared to one of them won on the road at your place and controlled the game. Plus, they took the number one team down to the last second of the game and had the ball in field goal range to win the game, versus if Penn State loses this game by 20 points. No, Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State if that happens. If Penn State plays Oregon to the wire, fine. They went to the conference championship game. Rank them higher.
Yeah. You know what this kind of reminds me of, though, is the year that we lost to Oklahoma, and Ohio State was getting absolutely throttled for having 2 losses because they scheduled an out-of-conference difficult team. What was that, the year we went 10-2?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were getting absolutely bashed because they actually went out and scheduled that out of conference. That's what's kind of reminded me this year with Penn State just happened to not have to play Oregon or Michigan or, well, I mean, I guess those are pretty much the top 2, or Indiana. Well, Michigan's not top 2, but you know what I mean.
That's a good point you just made. You just basically extended the point even more.
Yeah.
Penn State, the best team that Penn State played in the Big Ten was, besides Ohio State, was
Illinois.
Yeah.
And
Ohio State played Michigan, Oregon,
Penn State, Indiana.
and Indiana. That's who I was trying to think of that you just named, Indiana.
And even in that Illinois game,
absolutely.
that game close until halftime, and then Penn State's defense kind of stepped up in the second half.
It was 14-7 with like 4 minutes left in the game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
there's no
way you can't punish Penn State if they go and get blown out.
You can even argue even if they lose exactly the way Ohio State lost.
Yeah,
Ohio State should still be ranked ahead of Penn State because they beat them head to head.
Yep, in Happy Valley.
And they had to play Indiana.
Yeah, and when they played Oregon, they went to Eugene. They're not playing in Indianapolis.
Yeah, there's so many,
which is more of a home game for Penn State. If you think right, wouldn't Indianapolis be more of a home game than anything? When you compare to Oregon. But I just wanted to say that you're hitting your takes spot on, and I wanted to bring up the Georgia thing. Now Ohio State's going to get dropped, understandable. Kirby Crybaby is going to get his way, and he's going to end up in the 5 seed. I know you talked about that a couple weeks ago about what what he's complaining about. He sees that path in the 5 seed. It always seems to work out that way in these playoff systems where the SEC big top dogs always end up with the easier path. But is Georgia going to get punished at all for winning 20 or winning in 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech?
They should. They should get some credit for winning a game.
Yes, they should.
But they were
at home though, 8 overtimes.
Yeah, they basically got outplayed by a team that's about the 40th best team in the country.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. And I don't want to sound like an SEC hater. Because I'm not an SEC hater, but everyone knows the bias that the SEC does get. They always get the favoritism. They always get the benefit of the doubt. And I already see it on selection day. Alabama's going to get the benefit of the doubt, even though they lost that horrible game against Oklahoma, lost that horrible game against Vanderbilt. And I just think that I'm not the only one that's getting sick of seeing it.
Well, you're right.
Because you let a Big Ten, you let Penn or Ohio State go out there and lose to teams like that, they have no shot. I understand Alabama beat Georgia, but I mean, how far are they going to carry that weight? I mean, how far is that going to carry them when you match it up against their two terrible losses?
Yeah. They beat Georgia. They beat LSU.
Well, LSU's
They beat South Carolina.
Yeah, the South Carolina. I was going to say South Carolina win probably carries more weight than the LSU one now.
Well, South Carolina's 9-3 and LSU's 8-4, and LSU beat South Carolina. So I don't know that they're that far apart. LSU's going to get ranked this week, finishing 8-4.
Oh, they ended up winning today.
Yes, they beat Oklahoma by 20.
Yeah, I seen it. What, they beat them by 20?
Yeah.
I think I saw it last time I looked. It was like tied or something like that.
Yeah, it was 37-17.
Yeah, it was 17-17 was when I seen it. I was like, is Oklahoma about to do it again? Nussmeier probably threw the ball 63 times today. But do you see a scenario where do you think Clemson has to win or not Clemson, but what do you I'm sorry, I'm kind of baffled in my words. Sorry, it's been a tough day. If you're South Carolina, I don't see how they're going to jump Alabama and Ole Miss. Do you think Clemson going on to win the ACC title would kind of give South Carolina that little bump that the committee could be like, well, they did just beat the ACC champs, and that would be able to move them above Alabama and Ole Miss?
Well, we've all been through this enough to know that the committee will do whatever they want, and then they will justify it. I could be on the committee and spin the same tales that they do and come up with all sorts of reasons why. You can give me almost any team in the country that's won some games, and I can spin a way to make them sound good, or I can make them look like the worst team in the country. And that's what the committee does. A lot of people criticize the committee for not having any criteria. They have criteria.
They just don't always follow it for every team.
Exactly. They're not consistent with it. They use whatever criteria. They've got like 7 points of criteria. And for Alabama, they use 2, 6, and 7. And for Miami, they use 3, and 5. They use whatever they want for that particular situation. So to answer your question, I don't know what they're going to do, because there are probably voices in that room that really like South Carolina because of how well they're playing, the football people. So you basically have a lot of metrics and a lot of strength of schedule and game control and yardage numbers and yards per play. You just have a zillion statistics that they're throwing around.
Let's be honest, they also look at,
and then
you've got playing in the SEC
football coaches that are saying, yeah, they're good, they're not good, they're better than them, that quarterback's a threat, whatever. And they try to put all that together. Yeah. Plus you just threw out the 3-letter word that pushes things in that direction, the SEC. So when it comes to South Carolina, comparing them to Alabama and Ole Miss, I can't get past head-to-head, because I think there's a reason we play games.
Yep.
So the Alabama-South Carolina game was close, but Alabama still beat them 29-27, and they both finished 9-3, and they play in the same conference, and they're schedules are almost they're extremely close. And especially Ole Miss, they beat South Carolina in
Handedly.
Columbia by 24 points.
Yeah.
And so now, but if the committee wants to say South Carolina, like you just pointed out, just beat a Clemson team that, like, if these three teams were completely separate in different conferences and there was no comparison, they didn't play each other, and they had Alabama 13, Ole Miss 14, South Carolina 15 right in a row like they did last week, and they all won, but South Carolina beat a really good Clemson team that was number 12, and Alabama beat a marginal Auburn team, and Ole Miss beat a lousy Mississippi State team by not that much, then they've got every reason to say, well, that Clemson win trumps those two wins, and that jumps their resume right over them. But they have a hard time doing that in my book because they lost to those two teams. And I think they'll honor the head-to-head. I think they will.
Right.
But I might be wrong.
I thought about. Oh, there's a couple of things. Well, who would, as a college football fan, are you kind of rooting for SMU to get in over Clemson just because we've, in my opinion, I like to see these teams like SMU and Arizona State get into something like this.
Sure.
I've seen, as a Buckeyes fan, I know we get in a lot, but there's also underdog stories that you kind of like want to root for. Now, on the other flip side of that is, do we want a Liberty, Oregon? Do you see a scenario where SMU could go up against somebody and it ends up turning into Liberty, Oregon? Or do you think SMU is a way better team than what that Liberty team was?
Well, SMU's done something that's very rare. So every time we see a school elevate from the group of five, it takes them a few years to adjust. That happened to TCU. That happened to Utah. If you track all these teams, when they entered the Power Five, it took them a few years. Even though they had tremendous programs at the group of five level, it took them a few years. But SMU, they're about to win the ACC and they are undefeated. It's not like they scratched and clawed and won like a 5-way tiebreaker and they were 5-3 to get into the championship game. They're undefeated. So I tend to have as much confidence that SMU is just as legit as if Clemson won the ACC championship. They've played all the same team. They've played 5 of the same teams, and they've played those teams better than Clemson did.
Well, you'll get a kick out of this. I just watched the YouTube video of the ESPN college football final.
Yeah.
Or was it Chris Sims' brother or something like that?
Yep.
And Scooby, and I forget the other guy's name. But they said if SMU loses to Clemson, you'll get a kick out of this. They should be out. Alabama should take their spot. Now, and Chris Sims' brother even said, I'm a SEC homer always, but I just want to understand the thinking of these people that why is SMU out just because they lose to Clemson?
Because what we knew going into this is that an SEC team, especially maybe a Big Ten team, but especially an SEC team, is going to have a 1-game buffer. And so if SMU loses this game, they're going to drop to 11-2 and Alabama's 9-3. And so to the committee, that's close enough.
Yeah, but it's so what the playoff system is. Hey, the smaller schools, group of 5, if you're not SEC, Big Ten, we're going to give you a chance to get in, but you better be damn near perfect because there's an SEC school that we have no problem throwing in there with more losses than you. It's pretty much what they're saying.
Yep.
The last thing I wanted to bring up is the biggest thing that annoyed me about the game today. One, well, there's a couple things. One, I didn't realize that we signed the kicker from the movie The Replacements. Like he's out there kicking like somebody's taking his pub away from him. How do the shanks in that game? I couldn't believe it. But all jokes aside, well, it's 4 or 5 times I think I counted 3rd and long, and you're running the ball. Especially where Caleb Downs, he's the best in my opinion. He's the best defensive back in the game. Him and Travis Hunter. But the way Caleb Downs, I give Caleb Downs the edge just because he's not afraid to get dirty and he'll hit you. Not taking anything away from Travis Hunter's ball skills at all. But after Caleb Downs makes that interception, you run a screen pass to the tight end or something like that, or they just try to throw a flat to the tight end. And then on 3rd down, you run a draw play that felt like took 6 years to give the running back the ball.
Oh yeah, that was horrendous. They
But
wouldn't.
I think it was 4 or 5 times I counted 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. We're trying to run a draw play or run right up the middle.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go through the painful process of rewatching that game just to look at sequences like that. And I know I'm the first one to say that it's easy to criticize plays when they don't work, because if they did work, then you'd say, oh, that was a great play call. But they're not running for a 1st down on 3rd and 8 against Michigan's defense.
No.
And the time was running down, they're in the 4th quarter and they're giving up possessions and they've got the best wide receiver core in the country. I don't know what
Michigan don't have Will Johnson. Like, what are we doing? I just don't understand it. Was Ryan Day trying to make it a point like, oh, we're tough, I'm gonna run the ball even though we're getting 1 yard a carry?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna keep running the ball, or and
run on 3rd and 1. I have no problem with that.
I don't either. But like, you're 3rd and 5. We're just he played not. He looked like he coached. Him and Chip Kelly both looked like they coached to not lose the game. That ended up losing them the game.
I hear you.
And it's frustrating. When it comes to the Ryan Day, the fire Ryan Day, I'm with you. If they get into the playoffs, when they get in, because they should get in. When they get in and they lose in the 1st round, I don't think another year. This seems to be going downhill. This is the best roster that they've had and that Ryan Day's ever had. Would you agree?
This is the worst season he's had?
No, this is the best roster he's had.
Oh, the best roster. Yes.
Yeah, and you're playing Michigan at their lowest, and then you go into the playoff and you get beat. I think it might be. I know his buyout's like $33 million or something like that, or 28 million. And I know the question raises, who you going to go after, or who would you get to replace him? I know Vrabel's name gets brought up a lot, but I like Ryan Day. My buddy met him a couple times actually. He said he's one of the most down to earth guys, but I just don't understand. Maybe Michigan's just his kryptonite. Maybe that's just what it is, and we gotta accept it. Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for the call.
I wanted to suggest something real quick to you about your Ole Miss channel. I used to be a streamer. I had like 4,000 followers. What I would do is get there's fan pages all over the place, like on Facebook and social media, and share the link there. That's what I did. That's how I got a lot of my followers. So I just didn't know if that would be a suggestion you guys could use.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. That is a good suggestion. I belong to about 40 Facebook groups of all sorts of different teams just to try to promote different channels. Like, I'm not a fan of any of the teams, and they always ask me, are you a fan of the team? And I say, no, but I own this channel. And then they usually let me join. So that's a great suggestion. I appreciate it, John.
All right. Well, you have a great night, Mark.
You too. Thanks for calling. All right. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Let me pick off the super chats, and we so much appreciate these coming in from Ryan, who says, Would Ohio State fire Ryan Day if they don't win the Natty? If they fire him, would Ohio State target Luke Fickell, asking for a disgruntled Badger fan? Luke Fickell has done nothing to set himself up for the Ohio State job. Luke Fickell was more in line and in a better position to get the Ohio State job after his last season at Cincinnati, going to the playoffs the year before that, and then having another excellent team in 2022. That's when Luke Fickell was a hot commodity. Going to Wisconsin and going 7-6 and 5-7 has not endeared Luke Fickell to the job market or going to Ohio State. So sorry, you can keep Luke Fickell for now. And you might be glad that you did keep him, because I still think that Luke Fickell is a really good coach. So he's not in line for the Ohio State job. Or I should say, I would be awfully surprised. Then we've got B saying Ohio State is going to make 10 to 20 million hosting a playoff game that they would not be hosting had they beat Michigan. Are we supposed to be applauding that, caring about that? Yeah, I don't think that that's significant, but you're right. I don't know if you've done the math. I don't know how that adds up. I got to think you're making $100 per person, 100,000 fans, that's 10 million. And then you make all sorts of concessions. Yes. And then it actually costs money to put on the event, but whatever that nets is pretty significant. So you're right, B. They make money hosting a playoff game. They also may not host a playoff game. You think of that as well. All right. Next in line, we've got Will chiming in. Will, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. Just celebrating. Happy that the Irish made it through. I gotta admit, I was getting a pit in my stomach that we were gonna blow the game if Christian Gray didn't make right before Christian Gray made that interception. But
Yeah, sure.
luckily, pulled through and in the playoffs. Maybe the 5, we'll see, but probably the 6.
Yeah, probably the 6. I don't know if you heard my take on that, but I think that unless for some reason Notre Dame is overwhelmingly the 5 seed, that they should get kicked back.
Maybe. I mean, it was only because War Manual said they were close.
What's that?
I mean, it was because War Manual said that they were close before, and that Notre Dame's margin was bigger than Penn State's, but we'll see. Do you know anything do you have I know you have Ohio State guys you talk to, but would any of them have an idea on if the AD's at all considering removing Day or?
Well, I think these things change quickly. So I don't think there was any thought about firing Ryan Day as of a few hours ago, but I think now that they wouldn't be doing their job correctly if they would not be planning ahead. If they were not planning for worst case scenario, and worst case scenario might be that they plan on keeping Ryan Day, but Ryan Day gets an NFL job and he leaves, and he's like, I can go in the NFL and go 7-8 next season and get paid a lot of money and be fine, rather than having to deal with this perfection bar that I have to deal with here. So that can always happen too.
It was just because Tony was telling me, saying that USC would remove Lincoln Riley if they didn't have to pay the large buyout right now.
Oh, so yeah, sure.
But the buyout does make a difference.
Yeah, especially now with NIL, because they want to put those resources elsewhere.
Mark, do you think Miami's definitely done?
Well, you would think that they would be, but when you start to add it up, again, there are other teams losing. So
Mm-hmm.
I just went through it, and this was just off the top of my head, but you tell me the team that I'm missing, which I guess would be the Big 12 champ, but I don't know how high either Kansas State and Iowa State are going to rise this week, or Arizona State and Kansas State, or Arizona State and Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Oregon at 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3. For some reason, we got an echo going. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if you've got me. Anyway, Oregon 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame 4, Georgia 5. I guess Tennessee would get the nod over Ohio State 6 and 7, SMU 8, Indiana 9, Miami 10, Boise State 11, Bama 12, Ole Miss 13, South Carolina 14, and then either Clemson drops to 15 or they throw in Iowa State, Arizona State after that, something like that. So I don't see where Miami really drops. Maybe at 10 and 2 they drop them behind Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina.
That's
maybe
what I would guess. I would guess that.
If Auburn and Mississippi State were what they usually are, then I guess I could get on board with that more. But those are not significant wins. Now, if Auburn was a typical like 8-4 team, and so was Mississippi State, and those were pretty decent wins, then I get it. And I know Syracuse really, even though they went 9-3 this year. Where's Syracuse? Syracuse got the same record as Alabama and Ole Miss and South Carolina. Let's get them in there. Illinois. Want some Illinois love for the playoff.
Are they 25th now?
They were last week. Yeah.
So they'll move up. Good for the Illini. I know, like, Ohio State fans give me crap about this, but I was saying, like, is Will Howard actually an improvement on McCord? But with McCord's performance today and Howard's, like, do you think there was actually an improvement?
No. Did Kyle McCord play better last year than Will Howard did today? Yes, he did. He generated more passing yardage, more points against what was supposed to be the best defense in the country. He put up 24 points. Now, and he threw a bad pick on the first possession, just like Will Howard did in the first quarter. And then he recovered from it. And his second pick was the game's on the line. It's a desperation throw, and he got hit while he was throwing it. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't like Will Howard's second pick, which was just an awful throw. Yeah, Kyle McCord played better last year for sure than Will Howard played today. And the thing that is a bit unsettling is that was Kyle McCord's first season starting. We don't know how much better Kyle McCord would have been this year, having gone through an entire offseason under Chip Kelly in this offense and working with all those guys for a complete offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess me and Jeffrey can go on our victory lap about that on our show, but I mean, I still think
because you guys wanted Kyle McCord to stay.
Yeah, I mean, we felt bad for McCord that he got kicked out.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ohio State could still win the national championship, and then there would be some Ohio State fans that would still be mad about the Michigan loss, but like winning national championship would make up for that.
Well, I don't know if you saw, I posted a comment that somebody left here. It was a Michigan fan that said that I shouldn't even think about Ohio State winning another game this year. They're done for sure.
I mean, no.
So
I mean, if they play like that, they are, but I'm sure they'll play better.
Yeah. Well, I let it be known that I'm going to continue to hope and wish and just hang on to the 1% chance that they could possibly win a game against somebody like Tennessee. So I know I'm foolish to do that, but I just am going to not give up hope that they might stay within 4 or 5 touchdowns of Tennessee or Penn State.
I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to see that Notre Dame Ohio State round 3, but
Yeah, we could see that.
yeah. But I don't know. I would love an SEC team first round
Yeah,
in South Bend, but
yeah.
who knows?
I wouldn't mind seeing Indiana in the first round.
Yeah. That would be fun. But Mark, I'm gonna go. I don't want to hog it too much. I know
All
there's
right,
a
Will.
line, but
Thank you, man.
thanks for having me on.
Sure. Have a good night. All right, what do we got? We got 3 calls. We got Sean on the line. Sean, what's going on?
Not a lot of good stuff.
No, not at all.
No. Yeah, I wanted to. I don't know. There are a couple guys in the chat here saying they got disconnected. So if you wanted to put any of them on ahead of me, that'd be fine.
Oh, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, RTR said he got disconnected. So if you wanted to bring him on, I can wait for him.
All right, I'm going to grab RTR. RTR, what's going on?
Oh, hey, Mark. Oh, this is Mooley right here.
Well, I clicked on, RTR. Mooley. Yes.
Oh,
How you doing?
yeah. I'm good. First off, appreciate that, Sean. I got disconnected a couple of times, but real quick, I just got to ask, were you serious about where's the Illinois and the Syracuse love
No.
when compared to
No, I was kidding.
Okay, because lately it's been hard, the stuff I see about the SEC, because apparently it's a mediocre conference now. Because apparently, if it doesn't matter who Bama has beaten. The fact that they lost to Oklahoma by 20 plus points is enough to make them a mediocre team. So, yeah. Anyways,
Well, like most things, I tend to go in the middle, not because I try to be in the middle, but because there are usually, pardon the reference, but this is what was coming out of my mouth, lunatics on both ends of the spectrum. So I got to contend with Alabama or SEC fans that think that the conference is unapproachable and just the greatest thing, and it's basically an NFL conference, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and ignore a lot. And then I've got to deal with people that are ignoring that the SEC has been the best conference, and it's not debatable, for 15 plus years. And really, we have got no tangible evidence to believe anything different this year. The out-of-conference results have just proven, even though the SEC has been far from dominant outside the conference, it still had the best results outside the conference. And therefore, I don't know how anyone who understands math and results and can digest all that, plus knows how to watch football, can say that this is not the best conference in the nation. Now, that doesn't mean that the SEC's best teams are the best teams in the nation, but the conference is the best conference. And I don't think it's that debatable.
I know, I agree. I don't think most of that. I think like Big Ten, for example, at least the top 4 teams, I think they've separated themselves from like most of the SEC teams this year.
Yeah. So, for example, if you said take Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, and go play whatever are the 4 best teams in the SEC, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Ole Miss, let's say. I don't know who's going to win those games. I would be fascinated to watch those play, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Big Ten won all 4 or the SEC won all 4, or there'd probably be a 3-1 or a 1-3 or a 2-2 split. But I would be pretty surprised and shocked if they played all the way through from 1 to 16 or 18 and the SEC didn't win most of those games. Because once you start to get into the Michigan States, and the Washingtons and the UCLAs of the world against the LSUs and Texas A&Ms and Missouris of the world, that's where the Big Ten would have some serious issues.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't even be too mad if you said Big Ten was better, because obviously there's a big drop off from the elites, but there's still a lot of like mediocre, like not bad teams. Like I wouldn't say a lot of those middle teams are bad. I would say starting from like Wisconsin and downwards is like that's when you start getting into like the bad territory. You know?
Minnesota's not a bad team.
They're-
Iowa's
they're-
not a bad team. Sure.
But anyway, that beside, I know you talked about this, but I want to know your genuine opinion. Do you think Miami, after today, should they be in front of or behind one or all of these 3-loss SEC teams? Considering their best wins is Louisville and Florida.
Sure.
However, they their losses were to team. Forget the fact that they didn't get blown out, but I'd say Georgia Tech and Syracuse are better than Oklahoma, like resume wise.
Yeah, Miami lost to a 7-5 Georgia Tech team, a 9-3 Syracuse team. They were extremely pushed by Virginia Tech, who finished 6-6, 7-5, 7-5. They beat Virginia tonight. And they were severely pushed by a Cal team that I think finished 4-8, maybe 5-7. No. I think they finished 6-6. Yeah, they lost to SMU. So versus Alabama lost to a Vandy team that went 6-6, Oklahoma 6-6, and Tennessee 10-2. And then Alabama beat South Carolina. They beat LSU. They beat Georgia. Yeah, those resumes are better. I'm taking Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina over Miami.
Okay. Well, thank you, because apparently there should be a rule that a 3-loss team should be banned from going to the playoffs. I've been seeing that a lot.
Yeah, I have a theory about that. I don't know what the magical difference is between 1 loss and 2 losses, that people shut off teams with 2 losses. That's what it used to be. Now it's 2 losses to 3 losses. The only magical separation I think that exists is between 0 losses and 1 loss. And the reason is if you've got 0 losses, then you've done everything that you possibly can do. And even though we know better, it's not been proven that you can't even lose a game. You're undefeated, meaning we don't know if anybody can beat you. So that's the only difference I find between going, sure. And I had to think about your question because Miami is 10-2 and those other teams are 9-3, but their schedules and their performance to match those schedules is decidedly better. If they were down to 8-4, even if I thought that those teams like South Carolina, they could have easily lost to Clemson today. If one play would have gone differently, they could have lost. And I would think their resume is still better than Miami's at 8-4, but I wouldn't make that stretch from 8-4 to 10-2. But I will do it for one game, for a 1-game difference.
No, I definitely agree. I don't get what this whole debate is, but I don't know, because I'm looking at this right now. So if Miami falls behind, that means, and Clemson has also fallen behind. I don't know. I don't think do you think South Carolina after today has proven that they can jump these other 2 teams?
Clemson and Miami?
No. Oh, no. The 2 SEC teams for beating Clemson.
So I've addressed this a few times tonight, and my point is that we're not talking about teams that haven't played each other. If they were three just completely random teams from different conferences and they were ranked 13, 14, and 15, and they were all 9-3, and it played out exactly the way it did this weekend, that Alabama beat a 5-7 Auburn team, and Ole Miss beat a 2-10 Mississippi State team, and South Carolina beat the number 12 team in the country that's now 9-3. Well, then it makes total sense that they would leapfrog the other two teams. However, they lost to those teams, and they play in the same conference, and they play very similar schedules, and they lost to both of them, and they lost to one of them by 24 points at home. I can't get around that.
No, I agree. And yeah, no, I agree. I think what's going to really throw a real wrench in it is if Clemson goes in the ACC championship and beats SMU. And then, because personally, I feel like SMU went undefeated in conference play, and it only has one loss by 3. Okay, even though these other teams might have like a quote unquote better resume in terms of like what wins they put up, I don't know if I personally wouldn't feel right just dropping SMU out of the playoffs for losing a game that those other teams didn't.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think there's some cases where you can break that rule, but the thing is, there's a 2-loss difference at like not at the time of the playoff ranking, but at this moment, at the end of the regular season, SMU is a 1-loss, undefeated in their conference, in a Power 4 conference, and if they lose to Clemson now, if they get blown out, maybe that's a different story, and then we may have to look at who they've beaten. I know they've beaten Louisville. They've beaten a few solid ACC opponents that I can think off the top of my head. I don't know if they've beaten like any elite ones, but besides the point.
Yeah, SMU's best wins would be Louisville 8-4, Pitt, whatever they finished. I don't know even who did they play today. I think they played Boston College. Who knows what happened in that game? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Those were SMU's biggest wins, I believe. I can't think of anybody else.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get really weird, especially with the Louisville, because consider that Kansas State and who else? A&M lost. I don't think A&M would drop out of the rankings entirely, but with Kansas State, I don't know who the next best team is to throw in the rankings. Like I don't even know if I would even put Syracuse in there, just because they got that's Stanford. I know Louisville also has a Stanford loss, but they beat up on Pitt. That Syracuse was destroyed. That Kyle McCord, watching Kyle McCord throw 5 interceptions, I don't think people mentioned. That was one of the worst things I saw this year. But even with the extra loss, even though Louisville had also lost to Stanford as well, I may even still put them. I don't know. It's hard. I get it, but
I understand what you're saying, and I understand that you probably just think Louisville's better, but if we looked at Syracuse's results right next to Louisville, we might be a little bit surprised how Syracuse, they obviously played very similar schedules.
mm-hmm.
Now, the reason Louisville might have an extra loss is they played Notre Dame outside the conference, and Syracuse played no one. So that's basically the difference right there. And so in the conference, they're both 5-3. Yeah, they both lost to Stanford. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
If Fran Brown had a working brain on that night, Syracuse would not have lost to Stanford. I don't know if you saw that game, but
no,
it was the worst clock management I've ever seen in my life. The worst.
Okay.
So Syracuse is winning the game by like 1 point. And so obviously Stanford needs to kick a field goal to win the game. They get the ball at like their own 25-yard line with like 3.5 minutes left in the game. Stanford proceeds to just methodically move the ball down the field. And the clock is just bleeding because they've got all the time in the world. It's 2 minutes. It's 1:45. They're crossing midfield. Syracuse has all 3 timeouts. And I'm sitting there watching this game thinking, once they got on the fringe of field goal range, I'm thinking, when is he going to take a timeout? Even to the point where there was about 35, what's the play clock? 35 seconds. There's 38 seconds left in the game. And he let them, they got the ball down to about the 15-yard line. He let them bleed the clock all the way down to 3, and he never took one timeout. None.
That's crazy.
It was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And you know when he took his timeout? He took one timeout to freeze the kicker. And I was like, I couldn't believe how horrible that was. I'm like, are you serious? You saved one timeout to freeze the kicker. Who knows? Maybe he forgot and didn't know that they changed the rule and he was saving all 3 to freeze the kicker 3 times in a row. It was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. But overall, he must be doing a good job because he just went 9-3. But that was the worst clock management I've ever seen. So anyway, yeah, they both lost to Stanford, and we're getting in the weeds a bit with Syracuse and their factor in the playoffs. But
Hey, I'm just saying in terms of like if they throw in another team in the ACC, because then it's going to say, oh well, Miami beat Louisville, or this team beats Syracuse. Oh, Miami lost to a ranked team. That's not a bad win, because unless I don't know who else you would throw in 3 or 4 loss.
well,
I mean,
Duke just went to 9-3.
I wouldn't. My only thing is,
They
actually,
took SMU to overtime.
I know they did that. Didn't SMU have like how many turnovers in that game?
6.
That's crazy. And they still lost is one thing, but the only, I guess it doesn't make sense anymore. But back when Georgia Tech was a 4-loss team, the reason why I had Duke below, because Duke lost to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech lost to both Syracuse and Louisville. Yeah, I'm deep in my ACC thing. I have this written down and everything, Mark. But
Yeah, it's written in my head because I'm right there with you.
yeah, and Louisville did blow out Clemson, but anyways, that's not the point. The whole point of that whole thing was if they throw in another ACC team in the rankings because Kansas State just lost, could that also cause an uproar? Say, hey, maybe look, you're gonna knock out Miami for losing to a ranked Syracuse, or what? Miami beat. What do you mean Miami beat nobody? They beat a ranked Louisville team.
Well,
I don't
you know who's going to jump in the rankings?
LSU.
Yes.
I mean, they do have 2 solid wins, but I don't know. Yeah, no, it's probably going to be LSU, and they'll probably keep A&M. I just don't want to see that because I just know there's going to be the uproar and cry for it, SEC right there. But yeah,
Well, LSU's got the best. Off the top of my head, they've got to have a better 8-4 resume than anybody in the country outside the SEC.
mm-hmm.
I can't imagine somebody else has a better resume that played 2 Power 5s outside the conference and played Alabama, Texas A&M, Florida, etc., South Carolina.
Well, hey, everyone wants South Carolina to jump Bama and Ole Miss because of their win streak. Why don't we throw Baylor in the top 25? They're on a win streak too. Use that same logic.
Yeah, did they finish 8-4?
Yeah, they destroyed Kansas today.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because Kansas, everyone's like, oh, Kansas. These Big 12 teams, they've been losing to Kansas. Kansas has been on the come up. And then they got annihilated by Baylor today.
Yeah, they did.
So it's the Big 12 is always something going on there.
Yeah, it is funny. Every year there's a handful of teams that got off to bad starts and were never really regarded anyway. And then they go on a bit of a run against some bad teams and they finish like 8-4, and you see them at the end of the year and think, oh, they went 8-4, huh?
Oh yeah, that like even after today, do you think like if Michigan, maybe not after beating Miami, but at least before the Miami game, I was looking at Michigan and I was like, Michigan has a 7-5 team. If you were to say Michigan versus Syracuse, who do you think would win?
Michigan.
Yeah. So yeah, even after that, yeah, I still think Michigan with that.
And Florida over Syracuse.
So it all depends on the schedules too. So
Sure.
yeah. But anyways, no thanks for letting me hop on.
No problem. Thanks,
Have a
man.
good one.
Have a good night.
You too. Goodbye.
All right, let's get Sean back on here. Sean, appreciate you hanging out.
No problem. No problem. Happy to help out RLR. Sounds like he was having some internet issues. So, all right. Just want to go over a couple of the things from the game that annoyed me today. Real quick before we get into the general picture here.
Yep.
Okay. First off, my main grievance, and I've had this problem with Ryan Day since he's been there. Quit going with what isn't working and abandoning what clearly is. I mean, the trying to run the ball in between the tackles in this game was not having any success at all. None. And they kept wasting downs doing it.
Yes, they did.
And the pass protection was holding up pretty well. I don't think Howard got sacked at all today. He didn't face a ton of pressure.
Yeah, it was relatively good considering the opponent.
And the one time where they had to be where they were forced to call a good game script, they drove right down the field.
Yeah, at the end of the first half.
At the end of the first half. It was the one time where, like,
yeah,
okay, you can't be cute, you can't be fancy. You just have to hang tight and throw the ball. And it worked. And they didn't continue that in the second half. I mean, it was mind-boggling to me that Michigan has a bad secondary. I mean, they legitimately statistically are a bad secondary. They give up a lot of yards in the air all year long. And I mean, the passing game was working. The conventional passing game was working against them, and they abandoned it in search of some sort of some sort of masculine ego sort of pursuit of balance. I don't know.
I'm starting to think that too, and I didn't want to think that because I thought, well, this guy's got to be smarter than that.
Yeah,
but I don't know if some type of stereotype has gotten to him that he wants to prove, okay, I'm not just this passing coach, not this just offensive guy that schemes up pass plays and develops quarterbacks, that I got to show that my team's tough and I'm tough and I want to establish this running game.
Right.
And sure, you do, even though the running game was basically not working at all, except for they got on the edge a couple times. Judkins did, one time in particular. That just the way it was working, I think that they had to throw the ball 70 to 75% in the second half.
Yeah, they just didn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really infuriating to watch because I thought the prescription for a victory was right in front of them, and they just didn't take the medicine here. I mean,
and what was it, like the second or third to last drive? They ran the ball. They ran that draw play on 3rd and 8.
Yeah.
And it's not like they had the ball at the Michigan 35 And it
Mhm.
was like, okay, if they get 5, then they're going to be at 4th and 3, and then they're going to keep going for it. No, they had to punt. They were at their own 15 or 20-yard line.
Right.
So what are the odds of them picking up a 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8 with a draw play, as opposed to actually letting the best wide receiver core in the
Right.
country run routes?
So I think they were anticipating some sort of blitz on that play,
Maybe
exterior. So it was like you delay it, and then if he breaks through that line, then he has a lot of room to run. I mean, I guess I don't really know, but it was an infuriating game plan to me. And obviously I started watching football basically in 1995. That's when I was about old enough to really comprehend and remember. And those 2 years I remember because that was about the time I moved to Michigan from Ohio. And I remember talking all sorts of crap the week before when we were like, both those 2 years, we were like 20-point favorites against Michigan. And then having to eat it the next week and on the schoolyard during recess. It's not fun. So a little PTSD here for me, like really good Ohio State team losing to a very average Michigan team. So, and yeah, obviously very frustrating after losing 3 in a row. And, the 3 losses before today were not, I mean, those were against really, really top level Michigan football teams. This was not that today. So this is more painful, I think, than any of those 3 losses in the 2020s here. So,
yeah, from that standpoint of the expectation of winning the game, but
yeah.
we didn't have a 12-team playoff.
No. But in some sense, like, and I fully expect Ohio State to be very competitive in the playoff. I think they could very easily win it. I mean, like, it's going to be very difficult to win it, but it's not unimaginable at all that they could emerge, holding up the whatever trophy it is at the end. But there's so much, and you've lived this rivalry yourself, so you kind of understand. Like, there's so much put on this game that the season is kind of incomplete without a win over Michigan.
Oh, sure. Even if they win a national championship. Yeah,
absolutely. So, all right. Yeah. So done with that therapy session. Moving forward, I think it's somewhat important that Ohio State gets into that top 6 spot, the 6 range. And I think it's very possible that it could do if Oregon and Texas both win. I think that puts Georgia and Penn State both below Ohio State. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're not wrong, especially in Georgia's case, because obviously that's a 3rd loss, but then also Penn State. I don't know how much of this show you've heard, but people have brought up Penn State, and I see it this way. I am willing to give Penn State the concession this week because they've got a better record. Okay. But next week, we're going to see them play the same team Ohio State played 32-31 on the road down to the last second of the game. And so if Penn State can't come close to matching that, then they're going to be 11-2. Ohio State's going to be 10-2. That's basically the same record. And Ohio State beat them at their place and with a decided yardage advantage.
And Penn State and Ohio State will have 2 wins over playoff teams, and Penn State will have 0 at that point.
That's where I'm headed. So
okay.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, like, it would be kind of insane if Penn State lost, especially if they lost decisively, to put Penn State ahead of Ohio State, I would think.
And that if they don't lose decisively, you could argue it. But yeah, certainly if they lose 38-24, they
Yeah.
better not be in front of Ohio State because that would be insane.
Right. Right. I mean, and it's what I'm saying with the way they've developed this bracket, and I think I have so many issues with. I've talked with you many times about the way they set up this playoff system. I think it's kind of a joke. I mean, the best spot to get to the semifinals is probably the 5 spot. I don't think Ohio State's going to get there. I don't think Ohio State's going to jump over Notre Dame right now. Probably not. But, getting in that 6 spot, because, those 3 and the 4 spots are fairly soft. I mean, those are not necessarily top level teams in those 3 and 4 lines.
Yeah.
Right there. So, it's a much tougher road to hoe if you have to go through the 7 through 10 spots on the bracket. So, I mean, there's definitely rooting interest there. Got to be rooting, I think, for Oregon and Texas to hold serve there. So,
yeah.
I mean, what do you think about Texas's resume versus Ohio State's? Like, you think Texas would be seated ahead of them? Oh, obviously, because they have the one common opponent, so that would almost for sure.
Yeah. So you're talking about if Texas loses?
Yeah, if Texas lost, yeah, they would for sure be ahead of Ohio State then, right?
Yeah. Well, they'd have a win against Texas A&M. So Texas best win?
But I was just thinking about this, though, that like Texas beat Michigan by very, very easily, and Ohio State just lost to them. So, like, that kind of nullifies that discussion, really. Do you think it does?
I don't think it should nullify it's a data point.
Yeah.
But Texas beat Vanderbilt and Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M's 8-4. Vandy, Arkansas.
Is Vandy 6-6?
Missing Oklahoma, Vandy, and Michigan. Arkansas are 6-6, and Michigan 7-5.
Yep.
Versus Ohio State, Penn State 11-2, Indiana 11-1.
Mm-hmm.
And then who does it go to after that? Iowa 8-4. So Ohio State has significantly better wins.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like I think almost for sure Georgia would fall below, and I mean, I just have a feeling Texas would probably get the nod ahead of Ohio State, especially because they were playing on championship weekend.
Yeah.
And they only had 1 loss during the regular season. So, yeah. So, I mean, getting to that 6th spot, I think is fairly helpful if they can. I see almost no way they fall into the realm of a traveler during the first round of the playoff. Do you see that at all? Could they be in that 9 to 12 spot at all?
I just jotted down everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before this weekend's games. So, this is, as of right this second, I've got them at 7.
Yeah.
And Penn State loses. And if the committee's thinking like we do, then they drop below Ohio State. I don't think Georgia would.
You don't think Georgia would drop below Ohio State?
Not if they play Texas close.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll get credit.
What's Georgia's good win this year, though?
Georgia's best win would be Tennessee. And who am I missing?
Tennessee, anything
to Georgia Tech.
Clemson.
Clemson 9-3.
Yeah.
Thought there was somebody else in there. Florida 7-5. I thought there was somebody else in there. I guess not.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'll just be very interested to see if they get. I think that's very critical. If they get that 6 or that 7 spot, this weekend. So, or when it comes, playoff time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just questioning. Also, you think Boise's got a lock for a bye right now if they pull it out? Can a Big 12 team possibly jump them, or could they even be the 3? I think they could be 3.
Yeah, they could be the 3.
Yeah.
Well, they shouldn't be the 3. Although if Clemson wins, I guess they could be the 3.
Yep.
I don't see how they don't hold on to at least the 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see. Arizona State was at 16. They were the highest ranked Big 12 team,
Mm-hmm.
and they just beat a lousy team. That's not going to give them anything. And I can't think of who would drop below Arizona State. Maybe Clemson, but playing as close as they did against South Carolina, I don't think they should. I guess BYU. Well, BYU was behind them. I don't have the rankings in front of me, but I can't think of anybody that would drop below Arizona State this weekend.
I mean, I think Clemson probably will drop a little bit below that, but they can ameliorate that with a win over like a 7th or 8th ranked SMU team.
Yeah.
Right. So
I don't agree with if Arizona State's truly, I think they were 16.
Yeah.
And Clemson's 12.
Mm-hmm.
And Clemson lost in the last minute of the game to 15. I don't really buy into that reasoning. But anyway, let's say Arizona State's 15 this week, and Boise's still 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. And they're going to play 16, and Boise State's going to play a nobody. I guess they could. They'll be 11-2 versus 12-1. I think that will be enough. I bet that they lift Arizona State or Iowa State.
So you think it'll just be the P4 in the top 4 spots?
Yeah, I think that for that to have happened, they needed one of these teams to lose this weekend and win the Big 12.
Yeah.
Or Colorado.
No, I understand that. Alabama in for sure now, do you think?
No, not necessarily.
So, yeah. I mean, that's interesting. You wouldn't necessarily put them in. I guess they're not in the top 12, but like I think that South Carolina win over Clemson's very helpful for them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just jotted down Oregon 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame 4, Georgia 5, Tennessee 6, Ohio State 7, SMU 8, Indiana 9, Miami 10, Boise State 11, Bama 12, and they would get displaced by the Big 12 champion.
Oh, wow.
Possible.
Yeah. That is actually quite interesting. They could be the first team left out in the playoffs there.
They could be.
Yeah.
If we get an SMU win.
Nice. All right, Mark. Well, thanks for taking my call, and I hope the rest of the year goes better than today went for both of us. So.
I hear you, Sean. Have a good night.
You have a great one.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, final 2. We've got Drew on the line. Drew, what's going on tonight?
Hook 'em horns.
I see ya.
Have you ever done that before, Mark?
No, I have not.
You want to try it? You want to try it?
On Aloha.
There, that was close. That was close. Good win tonight. I actually wrote down a few items I wanted to talk about. The first thing is your book on audio?
No, it's not on audio. It's on Kindle.
Okay.
It's not. Okay. I have not had anyone or myself read it. I guess I could do that.
I think that would be awesome if he did. I know I'd buy it for myself. I am going to buy this book for my dad, who's an OU fan, actually. So I am curious, will he like this book or will he not like this book, considering I'm just curious to your feedback on that.
Who does he root for?
He's a diehard OU fan.
This is the 1990s. There's not a whole lot of OU in there.
No,
They were pretty
no, it's all
non-existent
90s. Yeah,
in the
90s. Nope.
1990s. I don't even think they pop up at all.
For
Besides,
some reason, I thought you went a little later than that, but it's all 90s.
yeah, this book is about, because that decade had the biggest transformation of championship systems. That's why I chose the 1990s, at least to start.
Gotcha. Well, it's going to be a good gift, and I think everybody who listens to the show should go out and buy it. Obviously, we all like the content and all that. So
I do too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
just even just as a sign of a way of support. So I wrote these down. We'll hit them quick if you don't mind. Should planting flags be illegal or outlawed or some big? You have to. The player that does it has to sit out 5 games or whatever. Should we just outright get rid of that?
See, there are certain things in life that I think we should just be able to handle without having some kind of rule, but apparently not.
Okay, so
No.
my next question is were you a little proud that your Ohio State people put up a fight about that?
Oh yeah, I am.
Okay, good.
I didn't want. I got on here and I took all sorts of flack because I called Michigan a bunch of punks and so forth for messing around on somebody else's field, and then I was told, "Oh, Michigan owns your field," and
You need to learn how to take the L, Mark. That's what they were saying.
yeah,
That's what they're all
I
saying. You
don't
need to
agree
learn
with
how to
that.
be a good loser.
Show some
Not that they need
class.
to be a good winner, but of course
I
you
don't
need to
care
learn
if
to be a
guys
good
are
loser.
jumping around and laughing and
I'm with you.
celebrating their win, but you don't need to plant your.
I don't like it at all.
It's not your field.
And if somebody did that to my field, I would want my boys to do exactly what your boys did.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's a good
not your
takeaway on that.
field. No, I don't care if you win there 100 times in a row. Did you plant a field? Did Oregon plant a flag in your field? And then that's another thing I kept hearing. Well, it happened here and it happened there.
Yeah. I'll give it. Yeah.
That's another thing I don't believe in, is I don't have to agree with what other people do just because it's common practice. That's what I heard other people say. Well, it's common in college football now. I don't care.
I don't think it is common, actually. And I'll tell you this: it happened in the Michigan game for Texas. Actually, I didn't like it. And then I don't know if you saw the end of the A&M game, but it looked like the Texas boys were about to do that, and Sark rushed them off. I don't know if you saw that.
I
But
heard about
I
it.
was happy to see that because that's just a step too far in my opinion. But anyway, so I think there should I do think they should make a rule about it, and that would settle all this and solve all that.
Yeah, I thought the end of the game was for the players to meet at midfield and shake hands and all of that.
Yeah, it looked to me like the Texas boys were going to do something nefarious, and Sark ran over there and he kind of kicked your ass and
Sure.
shoot him away. So I was happy to see that. I don't like it. I don't think anybody should do it. So what I really called about is what I hate, and you guys just did it in the conversation you just had. And coming from a Texas fan, I think we know this more than everybody, or at least we feel we do. The context of all of these games, everybody treats these games as if they're played in a vacuum. Like, well, so-and-so beat so-and-so.
Exactly.
And you even just did it, well, Iowa's got a blah, blah, blah record, so they have a better, strength of schedule or whatever. And all the context is lost. And of course, as a Texas fan, especially this year, I look at okay, we lost to OU last year. That was our one loss. and we wanted to avenge that loss. I say we, of course, everybody kind of does that, whatever. And so our resources, which I think are a big deal that gets lost a lot in translation, I'll make a point about that in a second, or not in translation, but point is, all of our resources were beating OU this year. That was the last thing we wanted to happen. Well, who did we play the week after that? We played Georgia, and everybody's like, well, OU sucks. Well, we didn't know that at the time. And I don't think they suck anyway. In fact, I think our schedule is getting more and more vindicated as time goes by. So basically, we took a bunch of shit throughout the whole entire process, and then we get vindicated at the end when everybody starts losing to the teams that we beat.
What do you want me to say to that?
So, do you have any thoughts on that, or I want you to agree to it and say, yeah, you just made a great point. I think you're right. Yeah.
So your Michigan wins better as of today. What else?
No, well, let's talk about Michigan for a second. For example, going into that Michigan game, you know what? I'll ask it this way. Is there an alternate universe where Michigan comes out and Warren balls out against Texas and pulls off a win, and Michigan goes undefeated for the season? Is there an alternate universe where that happens? Because the confidence of the team, everybody believes in everything. Maybe a few balls fall their way. Maybe a few calls fall their way. I mean, every game, I would say 80% of every game can be decided by one play or one call. In an alternate universe, hypothetically, obviously.
In an alternate universe, Ohio State's won 25 consecutive national championships because based on what you just told me.
I don't disagree with that. That is my point. Right? And we all do that. We all do that. Had this call not fallen that way, but what my point is, obviously that's not, we'll put that all the way on the end. That's the 100 scale. The actual reality of that falls somewhere in the middle, where confidence, momentum, all of those things matter, and everybody wants to write that off as if it's not a real thing.
Sure, but we can't measure it. We don't know.
We can't, and so therefore we just completely disregard all the context of all the games. Like, for example, did Georgia win that game yesterday?
Yes, they did.
Exactly. But to me, they didn't really.
To me, they didn't. And this is one of the reasons why when I build my grid for my top 25 that actually makes sense, I got a grid and I keep track of everyone's wins and losses. And I put the number of the point differential. You know, Texas beat Texas A&M by 10. It says Texas A&M 10 on it. But if it goes to overtime, I don't put like 2 or 8 or whatever the final score is. I put overtime because that shows that the game was tied.
Yeah, and so in my world, if I'm going to look at like a win or a loss or however I'm going to look at it, I'm only going to give 50% value to who actually came up with the win, per se, something like that. And I'm going to give 50% of the value to the context of how the game was played. And I don't even mean just the context of the game itself. I mean the context of everything leading up to the game. If it's a rivalry, I'm going to view that differently than if it's not a rivalry. If they just came off a bad win or a great win, I'm going to look at that differently if they just came off from a bad loss. And I know that's completely subjective and that's like, but that's my reality. You know what I mean?
Well,
and I think everybody knows that to be true. It's a lot easier to just argue, well, so-and-so beat so-and-so. Look, we beat Michigan, so therefore we beat Ohio State. So that settles that.
Well, hang on. We know that there are intangibles at work. We don't know what the truth is, though.
Of course, and that's why I bring up the alternate universe thing.
There are intangibles at work that we can't calculate, that we have guesses at. Like anytime somebody says something about a rivalry game or a trap game and uses some of these cliched things, I know that they have some type of impact, but I don't know what they are. Like people make comments like rivalry games are automatically closer than other games. That's never been proven. It could be proven, Somebody could
Well,
go
no,
through
but
the record books and they could start to gauge what is the average score of these games otherwise, and then what is the average score of a rivalry game to show us that they're naturally played. This whole throw out the records crap. No, don't throw
yeah,
out the
but
records.
but once
The better
again,
team
you say
almost
that
always
hasn't been
wins rivalry games too.
you. Well, can you prove that?
Yes, I can prove it.
Well, I mean, you're saying prove it the other way, so I'm assuming you have put out the research that shows that indeed, and I could be wrong on all this.
Go through the OU Texas series. I guarantee more than 80% of the time, the team that finished the season with a better record won the game.
And when you say I guarantee that, that means you haven't done that research either. Just to be fair.
No, I haven't. I've looked at the series.
I know. Well, my point is like I think the opposite is true, and neither one of us have actually gone through those records and put together that analysis.
We can do that right this second. We can go through the OU Texas game from the last 20 years, and I guarantee that about 80% of the time, the team that was the better team for the season won the game.
But how are you, once again, though, how are we defining better team for the season?
They get a better record.
Okay, so that's how we're defining it.
Yeah.
And that brings me
That's
to
how
my
you
next
usually
point.
define who the better team is. They get a better record.
I know, and that's really my main like beef with everything.
Especially
is
when they
why
play
is
in conference.
even still, my point is just because a 2-loss team, a 1-loss team is not going to always be better than a 2-loss team. And in fact, if you wanted to take that analysis of some sort, I would be willing to bet 80% of the time you can make no differentiation between a 2-loss team and a 3-loss team, for example. Like, I don't think records have near as much factor as everybody else wants to put on them. Just because somebody has a better record, I don't think that says anything to as. In fact, I'll go a step further. I think the betting line, which is real money and real people making bets, would give us the best indication of who the better team is. Do you disagree?
I don't know.
But better than a record.
You're guessing at that, but I'm telling you that the team that has the better record at the end of the season would win a rivalry game most of the time. I guarantee it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy to an extent.
Okay, and that goes to my point again. Because they win that game, especially in the OU situation, because that's in the middle of the season, that builds the confidence, and that, like, look, I'm a Texas fan. I've lived it, I've seen it, and coming from the Big 12, I find all this hilarious that everybody's beating each other all of a sudden, because that's what we went through. Every year, we would have to play this. Baylor was a very difficult team. TCU. These SEC teams 5 years ago would have taken L's in the Big 12 5 years ago. That's why we left, because we were tired of this and we ain't getting no respect, and it was a gauntlet back then. So I find it all hilarious that it's all happening exactly. I'm kind of like, well, this is what we've been going through this for decades, where you have parity and good teams, and then we're everybody's Super Bowl. I know, okay, I'm arrogant about that, but I do think everybody wants to beat us, knock us off. That's fine. And so a lot gets lost in resources. Like, for example, you don't think Georgia was preparing the last week for Texas? If they weren't, it would have been negligent. And therefore, then they ended up finding themselves in a very difficult game against Georgia Tech, because they didn't prep for Georgia Tech. And by the way, if they lost to Georgia Tech, they knew that they were in the playoff anyway. So why would they prepare for Georgia Tech? I would prepare for Texas and possibly Texas A&M. That's where I would put my resources. Do we not believe that that's what they did?
Yeah, the value to me is still in the result of the game, first and foremost. Yeah, we can conjecture all sorts of things. Even when bowl games were more valid than they are now, there's always speculation over who's motivated and who's not motivated, and they didn't show up and they didn't, you know what? My thought is, if you didn't show up, that's your problem, and you're showing that you're not a competitive athlete. So
Well,
if you
but here's my
take the L,
thing.
I'm not giving teams like Georgia, and you should know this very well, Georgia, who showed up against Texas in the Sugar Bowl about 5 years ago and made all sorts of excuses that we should have been in the playoff and we didn't want to play in the Sugar Bowl against Texas, and they lost. Well, you know what? Too bad. You get slapped with an L, and we're not slapping you with an L and saying, oh, we really know that you're better, but you didn't want to be here.
And I don't disagree with you in that the person who gets the W gets the W, even if they did it on false premise, on false grounds. They had a call that went their way, and they would have lost the game. You still got the W. Set that aside. Just to show you my intellectual honesty, I think Georgia had a valid point in that whole thing. They sat out players. We were motivated. They weren't. And to act like that doesn't have some huge factor. And by the way, I'm saying this as a way to evaluate teams. How do we evaluate teams? People want to set all of that stuff aside and go, well, you lost. Too bad, so sad. Well, you should be more motivated, or you should, not have lost that injured player or that call. Like, all of those factors, especially in this game of inches, like, think about even just the Texas game. Think about that foot that was in the touchdown, right, with Blue. Like, if that were a quarter of an inch on that line, who knows how this game would have played out? Now, I'm glad that it was. Which brings me back to the point where my very first call with you, and my only call before, was we were arguing about the Georgia callback, the fans throwing the stuff on the field. And I said to you at the time, and I stand by it, that I'm glad that they made that call right, because there are no alternate universe where they don't make that call right. Now I, as a Texas fan, can accept my L and say we lost that game because that call was super momentum. That call was so important. And once again, hey, look, nobody should throw anything on ever again. Shouldn't happen. And I agree, and you're right on that. I'm wrong on that. I'm just saying I think the context of all the stuff gets lost in the argument, the politicking, and I just wish people would put a little more emphasis on all the context that go into these games. That's all.
Okay, but there's a difference between talking about it and raising those issues, because that's reminding me of all sorts of people that come on here or comment in the chat. Oh, Mark, you're making excuses. Or in my comeback is, well, I'm not making excuses. We're discussing reasons for things. And if we're not going to do that, we might as well not even do any of this. We might as well just say final score, so-and-so 35, so-and-so 27. And then there would be no other discussion to have. So I know that all these things are valid, but so they're worth discussing, but there's no way to put a value on them that can be accurate.
Quantified. Yes, you cannot quantify that. But
no.
So this brings me to another topic, and you can cut me off whenever. Honestly, I do appreciate the time you take out for sure, and we should all support him for real. But should we have like a system for the playoff committee where like each team gets a representative to make their case type thing, and have it? And I think we all agree it should be transparent. Because I do think these nuances, if we're trying to get the best 12 teams, I think it should be nuanced. I think we should bring in context. But I think it should be transparent, where we can all see it, and we can all argue about it. And that's what makes college football great, to be honest, and different, is that we all fight about it.
So I think that would be phenomenal. I think that would even increase the interest in the sport. Because people would be fascinated with hearing the argument of Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, and which 9-3 team should be ranked ahead of who. And what is
Yeah,
the
it'd almost
committee
be like
truly
it'd be like
talking
C,
about?
yeah, it'd be like C-SPAN. The representative for University of Texas is up. You have your, and he makes his case, and I'll conceal, or I'll hold back my time, or whatever. And so they make their case basically, and so we can all watch this play out. I think that would solve a lot of, this, because the fact of the matter is this 12-team playoff is taking nuance into consideration, as they should. And by the way, I don't think it should stop at this year. I think we should look at nuance from all the previous years in the near future, in the near past. Why wouldn't we? And by the way, they're going to do that next year. If they put in a bunch of SEC teams, and those SEC teams beat the Big Ten teams, you don't think next year they're going to take that into account? They should.
Well, I know that they will take it
or vice versa.
They shouldn't take it into account. They should let each season stand on its own. They should completely wipe out any biases about, or any actualities or realities about past seasons. They should start anew every season.
Assuming they are not human beings that could actually do that and wipe their biases out, my real question is why? Why should they? Why does each season need to stand alone? Why not take into account?
Because
Hey,
we already played last season, and there was already a champion crowned last season. This season stands alone based on the results this season.
Yeah, but last season we let Boise State and Indiana come in, and they just got blown out. And we should have, and we didn't bring in other teams. That should be taken into consideration.
No,
I feel like
really
I'm convincing you.
be.
Why? But why? Logically, why?
Logically, because each season is based on its own results and merits. Army was a football powerhouse in 1944. Should that affect how I view Army today? That I think that they're a great football team?
Yeah, of course not. But if it's the same team from last year, for example, which obviously you have players from the same team. I'm talking about the near past, obviously, the last year and the year before.
Those players should be able to prove it once again this year, or disprove it. Yeah, last year's situation should have absolutely nothing to do with this year's evaluation.
I hear you. You look tired, man. I'll let you go.
Well, I appreciate
it, though. I really do. Everybody support the content creators out here, making us, Anyway. All right.
Thanks,
love you, man. Later.
Have a good one.
Bye.
All right. Let's take our final call. We've got Rob here. Rob, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up?
Oh, okay. Okay. Hey, no, I'm just I just got back from a movie that I didn't really want to watch with my family. So, but thanks for staying on. I will say I was wrong on a lot of predictions today, Mark.
I had a great day on predictions, actually.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's awesome, man. I wish I could say the same. Foolishly, I predicted Notre Dame would win 38-17, and even though we won, it was a heck of a lot closer than I would have liked.
Well, you were right.
Yeah, I mean, I was fairly right.
Spread.
Yeah, and then the scary thing is Jeremiah Love got hurt, but I guess the comforting thing is I saw him standing with Riley Leonard after the game, moving around. So I don't think it's going to be hopefully too bad of an injury, because we definitely don't want to lose Jeremiah Love going into the playoffs. That guy's a stud.
No.
But at least Jadarian Price is. I mean, we got a great running attack. I mean, both of those guys got 100 or more yards, close to 100. I think Love had 99. I mean, if he'd have stayed in the game, he would have had 100. But average, yards per carry was great. But yeah, I mean, definitely playing at the Coliseum for Notre Dame is always like a kryptonite issue for us. So that's the only reason I was even a little bit worried about that game. But yeah, props to USC. They played a great game. It was a fun game to watch. But you know what? I will take going to my hated rivals stadium and winning, in a game where we had to win. So I'll take that over, style points or whatever. I mean, it was a 14-point win, but certainly was closer than the score would show.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah, it was. There were some other games in there. Like I predicted. I was right. South Carolina did beat Clemson. I just thought they were going to really take it to Clemson. Clemson played, really well defensively for the most part. I find it hilarious that Clemson is like backdooring their way into the ACC title game. I think SMU is going to win, and that'll probably be the end of it. But that's such an interesting narrative. This year has just been crazy, Mark.
Well, I get your point about backdooring their way in, but it really doesn't apply technically because this game had nothing to do with the ACC. But I get your point.
Yeah. Well, it's really because Miami lost to Syracuse.
Sure. Yeah.
And Kyle McCord just balling out over there.
Yeah, that's a game I've been eyeing for a long time. That I thought that would be the end of Miami's run. I've been hinting at that for a long time. I say that on the Miami show. I've been talking about that game for like 6 weeks. I've been saying, that's going to be interesting, that trip to take on Kyle McCord, because he's going to be slinging it all over the field.
Right. Yeah, props to Kyle, man. He's balled out this year. I honestly was wondering, like, obviously if you watched him at Ohio State last year, you knew he had the potential to be that kind of like gunslinger, but it always felt to me like he underperformed at Ohio State a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't want to say he was playing badly or anything, but I think with the weapons that he had, it always kind of felt, it almost felt like he had, a leash on a little bit. Did you ever feel that way?
Well, we can speculate a number of different reasons why he's apparently playing better now. One would be he's playing worse defenses. Number
Correct.
two,
Yep.
He's got an extra year of experience. Who knows?
Mhm.
I was just, a lot of these things, obviously, we talk about all night, but I was just telling somebody just a couple phone calls ago that who was making the same type statement that I'm kind of losing my brain. It's 3:00 in the morning. I was saying, that we'll never know how much better he would have been this year at Ohio State, having played an entire off season, working in the offense. Yeah, I would expect that he would have been substantially better.
Now I forget why did he leave Ohio State? Did he feel like he was going to be forced out, or did he just leave voluntarily? I don't remember.
As I understand it, he was told that he was going to have to compete for the job.
And so he just didn't want to. Okay. Well, yeah, he's got that stud tight end over there too, Aronde Getz, and that guy's a beast.
Yeah.
But anyways, enough about Syracuse. But I hate to ask you, Mark. I'm sure I haven't been able to watch your show. I've been on the road and like doing various other things. But what are your thoughts on Ryan Day's job security? Now, before you answer that, I'll just put an antidote out there. That I think Ohio State fans in general, not necessarily you, but like I think in general, there's a lot of them that want him to be fired, and I totally understand that. Especially at this point. But like, I think you also have to be a little bit careful because he is like 60 or 66-9 or something like he's got an 88% winning percentage.
Yes.
But so I don't know. I'm kind of torn on the issue. Like I've been defending Ryan Day for the last couple of years. I'm like, well, but it's getting harder and harder when you lose 4 straight to Michigan. It's like, especially this Michigan, which is like, I don't know, man. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought is that first of all, we should actually watch the rest of the season. So the season's not over. If people want him to be fired tomorrow, then that may be kind of counterproductive.
Right.
So they may want to watch actually Ohio State, even though I had someone warn me in the chat that there is absolutely no way that Ohio State can win another game this season. So somebody in the chat told me that they guarantee that Ohio State is completely incapable of winning another game. And I begged for mercy that they would just allow me just the dream, the hope, the wish, the 1% hope that they could possibly maybe stay within 3 or 4 touchdowns of Tennessee or whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs.
Well,
So,
that's what,
so I'd like to see them actually finish the season to
right.
see if they flame out in the playoffs or they actually do something. So that's a big determinant. But like you say, they have to replace him. So who are they going to replace him with that's going to be better?
Right.
I don't know who that guy's going to be. Not that they don't exist, not that coach doesn't exist, but people need to realize. I stated that if Ryan Day gets fired after this season, I'm not going to lose one moment of sleep. My head will hit the pillow and I'll fall asleep. It is not going to bother me whatsoever.
Right.
I
No,
don't have an
nor
issue
should
with
you.
it. But at the same time, if they retain him as the head coach, am I going to lose any sleep? No, I think he's a good coach. I think they'll be fine. Jim Harbaugh went 0-5 against Ohio State, and they stuck with him long enough to win 3 consecutive times and win a national championship in the conference 3 times.
Right.
So Ryan Day's 1-4. So
Well, the same type of person, Mark, that's telling you that Ohio State can't win another game is like the same type of person that was telling me that Notre Dame was doomed after that NIU loss. It's like, look, has anybody saying that kind of stuff? Have you watched college football this year?
exactly.
Like all the ridiculous games that we've had and upsets and all.
Have
Like,
you ever watched college
right.
football?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, Ohio State could easily turn around and put that roster. Like, look, everybody's had like almost every single team this year has had at least one really stinker game, except, Oregon, you can say, yeah, they kind of struggled a little bit against Wisconsin, but like, they just finished an 8-game stretch without a bye. I think that was their 8th straight game, right?
Yep.
So I think Oregon's really one of the only teams that you could look at and say, yeah, they really haven't had a stinker necessarily. They had a couple of like not good performances, but I mean, most teams this year have had either an embarrassing loss, a bad loss, or some kind of letdown loss. Like, it's just part of college football. It happens. It's unfortunate for Ohio State that it had to happen against Michigan, but hey, you know what? Look what happened in Notre Dame. I said this to some friends of mine and some other people. Like, that loss was probably the best thing that could have happened in Notre Dame because they were sniffing their own farts after the A&M game, and that kind of galvanized them, and they've went on a tear after that. So they were playing in a playoff mentality ever since week 2. So I think that's one reason they've been sharp. And now Ohio State can say, okay, guys, time to right the ship here. Let's go. Let's take care of business in the playoffs. And in a way, it's kind of good for them not to play in the Big Ten championship, just because that's something that they can use a little bit of rest instead of having to go up against Oregon again. I mean, you could look at it that way, I guess.
Oh, a lot of people have.
Yeah.
I'll look at it that way. So, yeah, I just people should also realize that there's never been a coach that's been fired that's had a record anywhere close to his. Like, it would be completely unprecedented in the history of college football, maybe in the history of sports. I don't know who would have been fired that's won 85% of their games.
Well, it's like the Alabama fans that are calling for Kalen DeBoer to be fired after this season. And I'm just like, are you guys out of your minds? Like, do you know how hard it is to take? First of all, that's one reason you just don't take a job of a legend, like Nick Saban. Like, you got to have balls of steel, pardon my French, to take a coaching job like that, because the expectations are sky high. And if you don't go in there and immediately like compete for a playoff spot or a championship, your fan base is going to like call for your head like they're doing. Like, Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. That dude was winning at Washington, getting to the championship, doing things that Washington hadn't done in ages. And he was a good recruiter too. Like, he was doing great things at Washington, and his record is also really good. I have no doubt Kalen DeBoer is going to be a good coach at Alabama, but his fan base is just unhinged. It's just like Ohio State's fan base can be unhinged. It's like, look, guys, careful what you ask for, because trust me, as a Notre Dame fan, all it takes is one bad coaching hire to destroy your program for quite a while.
Yeah.
So,
and most programs have been through that. Fortunately, in my lifetime and way before my lifetime, Ohio State has not been through that. Even John Cooper, for all of his issues, still finished in the top 10 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in 12 years. So he didn't have that bad of a run.
Right.
So they really haven't hired a bad coach. And so they haven't suffered that type of situation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just a crazy kind of scenario that we're in this modern age of football, where people just, it's like, if you don't win this second, you're going, fire them, you know. But yeah, I think we'll see what happens. I think Ohio State's going to be fine. Like, they'll have, maybe they won't get the 5th seed now, which is, something that they would have probably wanted, but I still think they're a better team than most of the teams that are going to be in the playoffs. So yeah, we'll see how that breaks down. And look, this was Michigan's Super Bowl. Like, Michigan had to play their absolute hearts out. And props to Michigan for doing it. But like, this was the game. This was what they wanted. And I don't know why Ohio State wasn't able to also come with that mentality, but it doesn't matter because, again, like you said, Ohio State's still going to be in the playoffs. So it's like, it ultimately it's unfortunate, but for them, but they're still fine.
Yeah, it's a horrible game to lose. No Ohio State fan wants to lose that game. It's the most important game of the season and all of that, but it's a different world now. And so in the past, it's been the end of the season, and it's not the case anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what, if Ohio State wins a championship, the Ryan Day narrative is going to change a little bit. A little bit.
Well, I hope so. That's why they're playing, is to win the championship.
Right. Yeah, the fans will still hate him for losing to Michigan, but they'll relax a little bit if he wins a championship. What was your favorite game beside that you watched today? I'm just curious.
My favorite game, I really didn't watch as much as I wanted to because I went live after Ohio State, Michigan, and I was just keeping my eye on Clemson, South Carolina at the same time. I can't say I really watched it. And then so it was 6 o'clock by the time, it's probably after 6 o'clock by the time I started watching the 3:30 games, and I watched Notre Dame and USC. So I pretty much watched that entire game as I was trying to watch Alabama-Auburn at the same time. And what was the third game? Miami and Syracuse. I don't know that I had a favorite game. I guess Notre Dame and USC might have been the most entertaining one.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Although Notre Dame deserved to lose because they wore those all-white unis. They never wear those again. Never. First of all, that's one of the reasons I love Notre Dame USC, is because I love to see the colors clash. And then Notre Dame goes out there with all white unis. I hate the white pants for one thing, but anyways, that's a different story. Yeah, let's never do that again, Irish. That was not great. But yeah. So I know it's super late for both of us. I'm probably going to start watching some recaps on these games because, like I said, I was out all day. I missed, unfortunately, most of the games myself. So.
Okay, Rob.
Always great talking to you, Mark, and hopefully, let's get some good luck in the playoffs here.
There you go. Thanks for the call. We'll see you.
See you.
Bye. All right. Did we pick these up? Yeah, we caught that one, and now I've got something in the way that I can't get out of the way. There we go. And we read that, and we got to know. Hall of Fame City Gaming. John here. Thoughts on Gus Malzahn doing UCF wrong? So, yeah, Gus Malzahn's got a contract. So I don't know what the deal is there. So Gus Malzahn has left his UCF head coaching job to take the offensive coordinator job at Florida State. If they've got him contractually tied to the job, then can't they keep him there? I know that that's not the way the world of big-time college athletics and sports works, but I would think that UCF, if they really wanted Gus Malzahn to be the head coach, they would say, no, you need to stay here. You're under contract. but it may be because they were going to fire him anyway. I posted a hot seat video and I said Gus Malzahn's probably gone, so maybe he sensed that. Then we've got Fuzzy Balls, who says ACC could have 2 teams in, but no first round bye. I don't see how that would happen. Well, I guess Clemson. Yeah, if Clemson wins the ACC, depending on how they get ranked against Arizona State, Iowa State, SMU is in. But if Clemson wins the ACC championship game, I don't see them finishing ahead of the Big 12 champion. That's what's going to be funny about one of these years. I don't see it happening this year. Is you could have 2 teams in the same conference, and you could have one of them win the conference championship and still be lower ranked than the other team, but then they would get the bye. And even though the rankings would be lower, they would get the bye and the seeding would be higher. All right, folks, appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. And we have a 11 a.m. Eastern time call-in show scheduled in the morning. So please join us then and get some shut-eye in the meantime.